All right, we'll call the meeting to order, and we'll start by doing the Pledge of Allegiance and the invocation. So if you don't mind standing.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all.
If you would please bow your heads. Lord, we just ask that you guide us and direct us tonight. Give us wisdom and discernment in making the decisions that are best for the citizens of Walton County. And in Christ's name we pray, amen. We're going to start by approving the minutes for the last meeting. Did y'all, everybody have a chance to read through them? Do we need any changes? Any questions? All right, a motion.
Motion to approve.
A motion? And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion approved. Mac?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Commissioners. Matt Carpenter for the Planning Department, CARPENTER. We've got a couple of items that we have requests to continue on. Would you like to take those at the beginning of the meeting?
Yes, please.
That would be item number 2, the Krupp Rezoning. The applicant has requested to continue to the November 11th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting at 4 p.m. in this location.
I make a motion that we continue the Krupp rezoning to the November 11th meeting.
We have a motion?
Second that.
Hold on just a second.
Oh, yes. I need to correct that. That meeting's been moved to the 10th. I think this may be a holiday.
Yep.
So if we could update that to November 10th at 4 p.m. in this location.
Okay.
I amend the motion. Let's move that Krupp rezoning to the November 10th meeting.
So that's going to be, that meeting will be on Wednesday. Okay.
Yes, sir. And the other request is number 4, under our QJ items, the Bay Grove Motor Lodge and Food Court. We have a request to continue that item to November 11th at November 10th at 4 p.m. in this location.
Okay. We didn't vote on the last one, though, did we?
No.
So why don't we get a vote on that one, and I know we got a motion and a second, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. I'm sorry, Matt, go ahead.
Those are our 2 requests for continuance. We have 1 legislative item for you tonight and 3 quasi-judicial items and 1 additional business item.
Okay.
This would move us to item number 3, the Fishcamp Rezoning. This is a land use change.
Hold on just a second, Matt. We need to vote on the second one that came up, too.
Okay.
So we moving it to the 10th?
Yes, November 10th, 4 p.m. in this location.
I make a motion, we move the Bay Grove Motor Lodge and Food Court item to November 10th.
Second? Anybody got a second?
I'll second that.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Now we can go, Mac.
Okay. To number 3, the Fishcamp Rezoning. This request has been reviewed by Bob Baronti. I'll ask Bob to introduce it for us.
All right, thank you.
My name is Bob Baronti. Good evening.
Good evening.
This is the Fishcamp Rezoning, LUM 20-000004. This is a small-scale amendment request by Rodney Estes, requesting to change the Walton County Comprehensive Plan land use map from rural residential to commercial and change the official zoning map from rural village to general commercial on 1.13 plus or minus acres, and the parcel, the property is located in District 1, and the parcel number is included in your staff report. all comments have been addressed. As you may be aware, this is an existing business that's already out there. There's been a code violation. This is the attempt to get the zoning change approved. If that is successful, then the development order project will follow after that. If you have any questions for me before I turn it over to the agent, I would gladly answer any questions I can.
Any questions for staff?
I thought I remembered reading that there were other similar commercial things in this area, but yet it showed as being rural residential. Did I read that correctly?
Well, that area is kind of, over time, different uses, but we're just focusing today on this one. But the land use that is prevalent out there by you see as a map is the resident, just like this one. So may I enter staff report in the record, please?
Yes.
And the agents are here to represent Mr. Estes.
Okay,
I
thank
will
you.
turn it over to them.
Good afternoon, Robert Kaufman, Kauffman, with Dunlap and Shipman on behalf of the applicant Rodney Estes. Mr. Estes is here today. Also with me here today is Melissa Ward, planning consultant with Dunlap and Shipman. I'm going to attempt to be short and sweet and turn it over to Ms. Ward, who will go into a little bit more granular detail on the reasons we're requesting the small-scale amendment and believe it's appropriate for this particular property. As some of you probably noticed already, this is the second time this has been in front of the Planning Commission. Mr. Estes was here to see you July of last year, seeking a change to light industrial. It was voted down at that time. The planning department and some community objections at that time focused on a use for tow service that was going on at that time. That use is no longer taking place. Mr. Estes is no longer seeking any permissions or land use changes or zoning changes with regard to that tow use. He simply is seeking a change now to the general commercial to continue the existing business, which is his insulation business, the property specifically being used for what amounts to a mini warehouse for storage of the materials. As Mr. Baronti indicated, this is part of the code violation resolution process. He has the DO application in. Getting the engineering for that is the reason it's been a year since this was last in front of you, and we're here today. And of course, seeking the FLU and the zoning change is the first step there. The property itself is one parcel to the south of the intersection of County Highway 3280 and Fishcamp Road. There is an existing Exxon gas station, which is also the Black Creek General Store right there, essentially catty corner from the subject property here. As you just heard, there is sort of a smattering of uses in that particular area. It's all zoned rural village with the exception of there's one little spot zone for light industrial extractive uses a little bit to the east of this property. But it's primarily residential with a smattering of some business uses within that rural village. We're going to have, obviously, public comment when the chairman calls for it in a minute. Don't know what that may hold. I can say, at least as of this moment, we're not aware of any community objections. And there is in the staff report packet that you have as, I believe it's Exhibit H, a letter that was submitted by one of the neighbors prior to last year objecting to the tow business. And actually, we've received an email from the wife. There was a couple who signed it last year. The wife has sent in an email supporting the application that we're here on today, as well as Mr. Estes' ability to continue his insulation business. Ms. Ward will be handing that out, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to her. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Good afternoon, Melissa Ward with Dunlap and Shipman for the applicant, Mr. Rodney Estes and Mid-American Insulation. And so Mr. Kaufman did a really good job going over the basic topics here, and what we're going to be talking about a little briefly, and you actually kind of tapped into that, was what happened. You're basically wondering what happened here. So rural village was a land use category. Some of you may be aware that it was and is a land use category that allowed 2 units per acre, but as a subset to that, allowed some functional agriculture, non-residential related uses. And those uses some time back would be allowed for different uses that allowed for small businesses. In this particular case, this insulation business is more like a construction office type business where you have your supply in the back and you have your office in the front and you run your business out of it. This particular building is less than 2,000 square feet, and it probably would have been reviewed at that time if he had gotten it before the zoning changes to be allowed at the intersection, because his property fronts up against Fishcamp Road and then a intersection collector road that goes through the subdivision. Potentially, he could have been given a development order before. Mr. Estes purchased the property, I believe, in 2017. He put up the building, started running a business, and then in 2019, he was cited for a code violation. That code violation included running the tow business on the back of his property, which included storage of broken vehicles from car wrecks on 331, and included not having a development order to have a business and not having a building permit for his building. They discontinued leasing the property to the person who was doing the towing business. That part is gone. He's hired an engineer to draw the plans to get a development order, and if the development order is approved, he'll be able to get a building permit running succinctly in line as it should have been. The project, as he originally asked for, it was light industrial. The choice of light industrial was based on the fact that there was going to be parked broken cars in the back, and there would have to be a big process. That was unfortunate, obviously, but after he was denied at the Planning Commission, he came in and asked Dunlap and Shipman to go through it with him and see what we could do. And the answer was, we met with staff and we came to the conclusion as a group, a consensus, that general commercial would be suitable. And to that end, I just want to hand out a few things to kind of give some guidance as you're looking at this particular application. I apologize for it being broken up this way. The first thing that I am giving or handing out is the rural village category. And what's important about the rural village category is, and I'm just going to show you real quick, is on the second page. You can barely see it. On the second page is item subset 3. It mentions that functional ag-related businesses require 5 acres. This is a little over an acre. They do not qualify to get a business development order on rural village today. That's why we need the land use amendment. So I just want to make sure that's clear. This is not because he wants to do more. It's because he'd like to do what he already has. I'm going to give one. These things were in some documentation, I think, that we submitted, but I just want to make it, break it down into the factual part of it. The next thing is the general commercial land use category or zoning district. And again, going back to the area in the back or on page 2, I can't even see my own highlight, I'm sorry. It speaks to the location of the business being at those intersections and general commercial allowing for general commercial uses, which this would apply. And the last thing, well, not the last thing, but regarding zoning, the last part of it, when you're looking at zoning categories, zoning districts, and land use, you're looking at what the primary uses are and what they allow. The primary use under general commercial are general commercial uses. The list from the Land Development Code under primary uses, it is highlighted, but I'm not sure you see it on this one, to be honest. I should have circled it. Specifically, it says in this section right here on the first page under general commercial, one of them mentions many warehouses, the other one mentions professional offices and storage of supplies. either way you look at it, this is a very small, less than 2,000 square foot, but general commercial business. And I'm just going to hand these out for additional evidence to. The request on the minor development order, we submitted site plans for that. And in order for you to understand what's being asked on this property, I have the site data table just printed out from the site plan that we're asking to be approved. That site plan or site data table spells out that the property is 1.15 acres, so that means it's not big enough for a rural village development order for a functional ag-related business, that the floor area ratio is 3.6% out of the whole, 3.6. You're allowed up to 50%. The open space requirement is nearly an acre, and that the impervious surface ratio, where you're allowed 60%, is actually only 29%. So he's not asking for excessive amount of development site. So the request, as I mentioned, specifically deals with what are we asking for and how do we get there? And his issue was he was running a business and then he got tagged with a code violation because he didn't initially set it up properly. He did not go to the planning department when he bought the land and ask, how can I have this business here? That's inappropriate behavior. That's not an appropriate behavior, and the response to that is you have to do what's appropriate to get where you want to be. So he has gone to code enforcement. In a code enforcement hearing, the magistrate gave him, I believe it was 120 days to correct his problems. That 120 days is for us to go through the land use amendment, to get the minor DO, and to get a building permit. He'd been through the process since 2019, and it was straggling on, so they didn't want to give him any more time on that, which is perfectly understandable. It's just we had an engineer who was extremely busy, and we were having difficulty getting the plans back. So we have 120 days from that hearing date to be completed. We've been continued a few times due to different circumstances, but I think since we're still on the same track, we can bring this into compliance. Another aspect of code enforcement or having to get a building permit after the fact is that your fees are increased because you didn't do it right the first time. So he is, as they would generally say, doing what he needs to do to make things right, and this is part of that. In one, just wanted to give you a map of the area. You should already have it in your staff report. It's a little bit bigger, and it reflects where it is. The north road here, that's 3280, this road here. And then as you're coming down, this is the property in red, and there's a marker to it. Right there at the intersection of Fishcamp and 3280 is the Black Creek General Store and Gas Station. It's been there for a very long time. And further down, there is a industrial site that's at this little corner. It looks like it's nestled in a subdivision. That's because it is. That's a light industrial use there. And so as you're looking at the area, if you're just looking at it as somebody who's not familiar with the area, what you're looking at is you're thinking these are all houses, and they're not. They're more like, some of them have home occupations, and some of them are, not. Some of them have these businesses. So just keep that in mind, that this is not a purely residential neighborhood. Behind it is Bear Creek. This is a purely residential neighborhood that I'm aware of, but it's separated by a wetland buffer that keeps them separated. So I'll just hand this out. And looking to the last thing, and it's what Mr. Kaufman mentioned, is that in the staff report, there was a letter of objection. And what I've printed out for you is the email that I received from our client that he received from what appears to be Classic Touch Pressure Washing Trudy. And that is a letter saying that that they don't object. My name is Trudy Wickman, and I reside at 30 Anchor Road, Freeport, across from the street from 60s McDaniels Fishcamp Road. I'd like my opinion regarding the zoning change on this property. I live and work from home and see no problem with the business on the property. I drive down the street daily and see no evidence of any blockage or traffic interference. my husband and I have great relationship with Rodney and have him spray foam our garage. In my opinion, Rodney and his company are an asset to our area. Rodney's cleaned up the property. The property was overgrown and people dumped trash there. Rodney has improved the curb appeal of the property and therefore improving the look of the neighborhood. So I'm going to enter this into the record if I may and give one to the staff. So, this is the culmination of my comments, other than we had some comments on our development order. And if you had any questions about how things were moving along or have anything about this presentation, I'd be happy to answer them.
Who
Yes,
is on the corner north of him? Is that,
It's single wide trailer.
and what does he actually do now? He just wants to keep doing what he's doing, but what is that?
It's an insulation business.
Okay.
For storage mainly, right?
It's mostly storage, and then he has a small office.
Any other questions? All right,
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, we'll open it up to public comments. Is anybody in the audience would like to speak on this? Seeing none, we'll close public comments. And commissioners, what are your thoughts?
I'd like to ask Mr. Carpenter a question. Do you think this is a good idea or a bad idea?
I think the applicant is within their rights to make application. This is a remedy proposed for the code case. When this project first started, we thought it was absolutely a bad idea because they had a towing business there without a permit, and they had tow trucks backing up all times of the night with their backup beeping going on in the middle of the night, and we had lots of folks that were objecting to that portion of what he was doing. The insulation business storage appears to be something that could be found compatible in this particular neighborhood. He's still going to need a development order and a building permit to complete the process if he gets the land use changed. But he has removed the towing business from there, and that was our main objection. And I think the main objection of those people that were previously objecting to the light industrial zoning classification. Ms. Ward did indicate that this neighborhood has been there a long time. There are lots of different things going on in the neighborhood. In 1999, there was 2 parcels that were changed to light industrial. But there are a number of people that in this particular neighborhood that work from home. And as she indicated, the Bear Creek subdivision to the west absolutely is purely residential. This neighborhood is somewhat of a mixture of live-work, quite honestly, and we have no objection to what is being proposed today.
He be restricted to keep it the same business he's got? He can't change it to something else, or can't he?
Well, potentially he could change it to something else with the appropriate development order that would be an allowable use within general commercial. Our application and a development order. I think right now he's proposing to keep it as just the insulation business.
So he would have to have a permit process to change it?
Yes,
Okay.
and there's still a permitting process to complete what he's already doing right
I
now.
got you.
But this is proposed as a remedy for the code case. So I'm not sure if I answered your question. Do we recommend land use changes? I don't think we're prepared to make a recommendation unless it's a county-owned parcel. We will make a recommendation in that case. But a privately owned parcel, we might make an objection, but I don't think we'd be in a position to make a recommendation probably ever.
I do know that we turned it down one time before, and there was a lot of objections to it, people in, but there's nobody here, so I think that probably says a lot for what he's done to try to straighten this thing out and get it moving in the right direction.
thought is we keep chipping away and chipping away and chipping away and making special exceptions and changing land code usages and going against, you know, and somewhere you're going to have to be held accountable to the rules. And are all these other people who have these other businesses, are they within code violation?
I know that we have one right now.
Probably more.
There could be more. This is an area where we're not proactive, we are reactive. If we get a complaint, we'll respond to it, and we have gotten one complaint very near this particular location.
I think the reason it's being chipped away is because it hasn't been enforced, so everybody keeps wanting to get it changed and bend the rules or maybe ignore the rules. And
Hey, do we have some ignoring of the rules out there in the last 25 years? Yes, sir, we do. If you can drive around out there and see that. But at the same time, this land use was placed on there 25 years ago. The county is continuing to grow, markets are changing, and I mean, our future land use map is not carved in stone. It's supposed to react to changes in our community. And if changes in the land use designations or zoning designations are warranted by conditions in the neighborhood, then that's certainly something that the board could entertain. These are legislative decisions. Getting a land use change is not a right. However, I would suggest that applying for one is.
yes,
But legislative determinations are purely the purview of the Board of County Commissioners. They decide if it needs to be changed or not. We follow the process that's prescribed in both the comprehensive plan and the land development code for processing these applications. And that's what we report in our staff report.
so when you brought up the point, could this be changed to another business that might not be as user-friendly as this one?
Got to go through the development order
He
process
gotta go
again
through
to
the
change it.
process to get it changed. He can't.
We would
just-
look at whatever we'd look at the compatibility of what is being proposed with what it is surrounded by. As part of that application process, that's what we're required to do.
And there's a list of uses that under commercial, it can be used as right now, and it would need to fall into those uses anyway before somebody would want to apply for it, or they'd have to change the land use again.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, sir. Very tactfully and diplomatically.
Thank you, sir. Have any other questions? Thank you.
All right, commissioners, we need some action.
I move to approve.
We have a motion,
I'll second it.
second. Any other questions, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed?
Motion carries.
Thank you, Commissioners. The next section of our agenda is quasi-judicial in nature, and we'll need to be sworn in.
Anybody wishing to speak on the quasi-judicial items, which is the remainder of this agenda, needs to stand to be sworn at this time. Please stand, raise your right hand, and repeat after me. I do hereby solemnly swear or affirm
solemnly swear or affirm
that the testimony I present
testimony I present
will be the truth,
the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
nothing but the truth.
Thank you. All right, Matt.
This moves us to agenda number 5, the Sanctuary Apartments Phase 3. This is a major development reviewed by Bob Baronti, and I'll ask Bob to briefly introduce it before he turns it over to the applicant.
All right, Bob.
Good evening again. This is Sanctuary Apartments, Phase 3, project number MAJ 20-000014. It's a major development application submitted by William Pope requesting to construct up to 96 dwelling units assigned to Phase 3 on approximately 14.38 plus or minus acres with a future land use of residential and mixed use with a zoning district of residential preservation and small neighborhood. The property is in district, and we didn't put that in there, and the parcel number is in your staff report. The project, just before I turn it over to Mr. Pope to review the project and answer any questions, there are no outstanding comments. The project meets the code and land development, or the comp plan and the land development code, and I would like to enter the staff report in the record.
Okay.
And may I answer any questions before I turn it over to Mr. Pope?
Any questions for staff? Okay.
I'll turn it over to Mr. Pope for.
Thank you. Bill Pope is my name. I represent Rose Star, which owns Sanctuary Apartments. We're here to request additional 96 apartments. We have an existing 264 apartments, for about 4.5 years. And we have about 50 acres, a little bit less than that. And the first part was developed in 32 acres. This is a roughly 14 1/3 acre site that we're putting 96 units on. We are part of an overlay district, and we have, in our original deal, we had 374 units available, and we're utilizing 96 of those, plus the 264 existing. So that's where we are now. We don't have much more. We've presented this many times before, so we'll open it to any way you want to. If you have questions, I'd be glad to answer them, but
Y'all have any questions for the applicant? Yeah, I know you presented last time, so we went through a lot of that. No questions for the applicant? Okay, well, we'll close it and open it to public comment unless anybody else. Okay, we'll open up public comments. Anybody like to speak on this? Yes, sir. Come up here. Okay. Everybody see that okay? Adjust it. We can see it.
This is in connection with the inserts that were submitted there in the staff report as well. My name's Stephen Barber. I represent the Magnolia Subdivision. Homeowners, the homeowners within the Magnolia Subdivision, more specifically identified in Exhibit A attached to our letter that our office prepared and was submitted on October 12th, but I would like to submit this as part of the record this evening.
Okay.
Give a copy to the clerk, and if you need, you just copy for each board.
I don't have a copy for each.
Do you have a copy of the applicant?
I do have a copy for the applicant. I do have a copy for staff as well. Again, this was submitted on October 12th. We'd checked to make sure that this was.
Yeah, we don't have it to review, so I don't know how much good it's going to do you, but.
Okay. Well, regardless, we did submit this on October 12th for review by the commission, but just moving right along, in Exhibit A of the letter that was actually submitted as part of the September 9th, 2021 meeting by the homeowners. Those are the homeowners that we represent. I'd like to begin by just noting at the outset that the homeowners don't oppose this project as a whole. It's not that they just hate the sanctuary and they don't want to see it built. To the contrary, there's really just a concern over this proposed connection that you can see between the sanctuary Phase 3 and Cedar Street, which would lead directly into the Magnolia subdivision roadways which were never intended to support this amount of traffic, which would accompany the 96 unit development, or indeed the total proposed 371 units that the applicant has sought. However, during the course of our research, we did uncover several other potentially very troubling issues that we wanted to raise for the Commission's attention. Essentially, those issues, which we identified in our letter, they pertain to density. There's some environmental concerns, the conservation of wetlands. There's also the traffic concurrency issues and an issue with the traffic analyses which were submitted, and also with the underlying compatibility for the project as a whole. Taking it from the top, as far as the dwelling units which were allotted here, this 8 plus or minus dwelling unit per acre allotment is incorrect. So it doesn't take into account the various zoning districts which are contained within the development as a whole. As you can see, as far as Phase 1, 2, and 3 are concerned, Phase 3 has several lots of record which are residential preservation. That doesn't allow for 8 dwelling units per acre, only 1 dwelling unit per lot of record. Additionally, there's no density bonus points which can be allotted to residential preservation underlying zoning districts. And we know from the PUD ordinance, the 2009-17 ordinance, which governs the PUD overlay, it makes explicit provision for, it appears, just this situation. It says, quote, "The PUD overlay district may include all of the uses allowed in those categories, but may not exceed the total allowable densities and intensities for each of those uses." This is also echoed by Section 2.06.01 of the Land Development Code, which states, once again, that PUD overlay districts cannot exceed the overall allowable densities or intensities associated with the underlying zoning district. There's a problem with allocating 8 plus or minus density across all 47 acres. It's not consistent with what the PUD calls for or the ordinance which governs the overlying overlay district. Additionally, there's an issue with the 7,700 feet of commercial space in Phase 2. Essentially, that 7,700 square feet of commercial space does not allow for that full maximum density, that 8 plus or minus dwelling units per acre, which appears to have been allocated by these plans. So that's an issue as well. There's also the wetland issue. So the original plans in 2009 called for 24.59 acres of wetlands, not 16. The current plans allow for 16 acres of wetlands, and there's no apparent explanation for what happened to the remaining acres. Additionally, if you look at the 2009 staff report, the 37.5 bonus points that were allocated, that in large part came from the Greenway corridor and the conservation easements, which were basically the conservation of wetlands. So if we're going to allow for all these density bonus points to be allocated, then we need to account for what's happening to those wetlands that are, according to the site plans at least, not going to be conserved. So that's an issue as well. Additionally, there's documentation that's necessary to be reviewed supporting these claims that we see in the staff report, both from September 9th and from October 14th for this meeting, that claim either the approval or the abandonment of conservation easements 2, 9, and 10. So there's an issue with that as well. That's not been made available for the public's review. The traffic concurrency certificates, to the extent that any traffic concurrency certificate was issued at all, there was on June 24th, 2020, an approval. I'm not sure if that's a certificate or just an approval, or there was really no explanation provided with that, but nevertheless, even if we do consider that a traffic concurrency certificate, that expired 6 months after it was provided for. And even if there was an extension after that, that still only brings us to about May or June 2020, or pardon me, 2021. That's, we're in October, so there's no apparent explanation for that as well. There's also an issue with the traffic analyses that were submitted in connection with this project. None of the traffic analyses mention a single time the Bay Magnolia subdivision. They don't mention Cedar Street. They don't mention any of that. But we have a connection that's being proposed that would funnel traffic directly into that subdivision. So in order for the Planning Commission to actually make an informed decision, it's going to be important to have an amended traffic analysis, a third one by this point, to allow for the commission to review that and make a decision thereon. Last but not least, the compatibility of the project is in serious question. So in the 2009 staff report, 4 separate instances, it was mentioned that there's this 200-foot wooded buffer that separates the two projects, the two developments, that is, that separates the Magnolia subdivision from the sanctuary. That will quite literally be eviscerated in favor of a connection whose sole purpose is to funnel traffic into this neighborhood. If that was one of the primary sources for the compatibility or the alleged compatibility between the sanctuary and the Bay Magnolia subdivision, it appears as though that's been severely diminished, if not entirely diminished. Additionally, the 2009 staff report appears to contemplate exactly this situation. It says on page 5, if any development occurs in the future, additional mitigation of impacts on the community, that is the Magnolia subdivision, may be required. Now is that time. There is provision made for this. This was anticipated that something like this may unfortunately happen down the road, and it's happening. So we'd request that this connection be deleted. This all kind of leads me to the sort of core concerns of the Magnolia subdivision. Essentially, this connection would wreak havoc on the homeowners therein. It would decrease the property values because naturally people don't want to live in an area where there's tons of traffic coming in and out, especially now one from a 96-unit subdivision, or potentially 371, I think is the figure. It's also more dangerous. The people who live here don't have sidewalks to get from A to B. If they want to go to their neighbor's house, it's a tight-knit community. There's children who live here and play here. That's dangerous. And if you have more traffic coming into an area, naturally, eventually, you're going to have more traffic accidents and, God forbid, injuries or fatalities. And that's an issue as well. And it's also, you know, worth noting that there's pretty overburdened roadways in that area as it is. 331, especially that stretch of 331, is basically a traffic bottleneck. Basically, it is a traffic bottleneck. Farm and Fire and the Bay, very nice restaurants, very popular. I like them myself, but they're contributing in large part to what amounts to a relatively dangerous traffic situation. It's difficult to make a right-hand turn from Magnolia Lane onto 331 as it is. This would only serve to make a dangerous situation even more dangerous. And last but not least, the applicant's representative in 2008 told all of the homeowners that there would not be any future connection between these two projects. That's exactly what's happening here. If you don't believe me, you can go back and look at the 2009 staff report, and it is replete with emails and letters of concerned homeowners, just like there is right now, talking about the exact same issues. And there's actually one letter in particular, which is attached as Exhibit C to our letter that was submitted for your review, which states exactly this, that there was a quote that said, you represented to us X, Y, and Z, which is that there will not be any future connection between these two developments. So again, I'd just like to underscore, the goal here is not to, you know, oppose the sanctuary as a whole or to, you know, unnecessarily delay or otherwise harm this project. It's just to make sure that this connection is not included. But there are several very important concerns which, if remaining unaddressed as they have been, will lead to the continued opposition, at least by the Magnolia subdivision homeowners. Thank you very much. I'll take any questions if you guys have any.
Questions?
Do you have any concerns about the floodplain, the floodwaters?
So I believe there was some issues which were noted, they're brought up in more detail in the letter, as far as the fill that's associated with the floodplain, the 24,000 cubic square feet. It's laid out in more detail therein. But as of right now, suffice it to say that there were some objections that were raised by planning, by staff. I believe that there was a note in the public record which indicated that that may have been assuaged in some capacity, although that explanation, at least to our mind, was not quite sufficient. So we would object on that basis as well, which again, I would just like to make clear is laid out in the letter in more detail.
We're kind of a disadvantage because we haven't seen the material you're talking about, but raise some important questions.
Thank you.
I got a question on the road you're talking about there. I know that that's a limited access road. I don't know how, I'm sure the applicant can answer that question, but How much traffic are you expecting to be going through there? Because I know there's a gate on there that I think is not accessible for just anybody. I don't know if you can get out that way or go in that way or what it is.
So, from what I understand, I mean, if you look at we already know that the maximum density that is proposed, at least by the applicant, is 371 units. That's a lot of people, potentially. There's quite a few parking spaces that have been proposed. Even if you only have just the 96 units that are here in Phase 3, that's a ton of people coming in and out of a neighborhood which is extremely small. I'm not sure if any of you had the pleasure of going back there before, but it's not a large area. These roads were never intended for that amount of traffic. And what's more is, I would love to answer that question, but we don't have a traffic analysis which speaks to that. And you would think that that would be included. I mean, it's clearly, it was contemplated at least by prior staff in 2009. However, this particular traffic analysis, actually neither of them speak to that particular issue.
Are you saying you don't know whether there's a gate or not?
What I'm saying is that I believe the question more specifically was, I don't know how much traffic is going to be coming in and out, although the anticipated amount of traffic is pretty substantial. If there's 96 units and only 96 units use it, it seems like a lot more than the amount of people who live in the subdivision as it stands. Although I could never really answer that until there's a, actual bona fide traffic analysis which speaks to that issue, and there's been 2 submitted, none of which speak to that issue, unfortunately.
So you don't know, but you're opposing it.
Well, yes, we oppose it because of the...
But you don't know.
We could never know, but we do know that there's 371 units that are proposed as part of this entire project, 96 of which are being proposed this evening. That's far more than the amount of people who live there. So yes, there's significantly more traffic which will result. I couldn't speculate exactly how much, but that's why we have traffic analyses to sort these sorts of things out. And of course, like I said, that was not to know.
I'm sure staff will have some answers for the traffic analysis, because I don't think they let anything get to us that doesn't have one.
Sure, and that's why we're here. We're here to raise these issues and to make them available for discussion, and we're excited to
We'll
talk
let
about
the
that.
applicant answer some of your questions. I think staff will. Sounded like a lot of the questions directed at staff to me.
I don't know if they were directed at staff necessarily. I just know that, I mean, these are several issues which we would like to have, answered. I'm not, directing them at, any one person. I'm certainly not trying to single anybody out or seem as though we're trying to pick some kind of fight. But these are serious issues that for people who live here and work here, and, we'd like to, make those concerns known and hopefully have them answered.
I think a lot of these questions get answered at the technical review meeting too. Am I correct, Mac? Were y'all at the technical review meeting? You.
I was not at any technical review committee meeting, no.
I think that's where you get a lot of these questions answered.
I understand. Do you have any further questions, or?
We'll get answers to your questions at the end after we close public comments, though.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak on this? Yeah, I'll get in.
Good evening, Melissa Ward for Dunlap and Shipman. Dunlap and Shipman represents the estuary across the bayou, from Bowman's Bayou. Specifically, to reiterate some of that in the very beginning, we're not opposing the development of the sanctuary Phase 3. What we are doing is bringing up some issues that was brought up at a community meeting that Mr. Pope and his group had at their community center on site at the sanctuary. Mr. Shipman and I attended that meeting and asked some questions directly related to the plans that were submitted to the county. So to give you a bit of the back history on that, when this originally was approved, there were certain plans that were going through. It was all very conceptual in 2009. It was a concept PUD with a technical Phase 1. I believe I'm correct on that. It's a concept PUD with a Phase 1 technical. So this approval that you're looking at is I believe it's an expansion of the PUD, and it's a technical review of Phase 3. Phase 2, I believe, is the commercial piece on the front. All still right? Yes, okay. So I'm confused.
We'll explain that later.
I'm happy to get cleared up, but here's the issue. Mr. Shipman agreed that the estuary would not object with 4 conditions, and those 4 conditions are Number one, if I may use this map, I'll use this map. Pardon me. Along this area, along here, you know, this, sorry, right along here, there's a tree vegetation line.
Yes.
That's to remain intact. I know it's in a conservation easement, but very specifically, that is not to be touched or cut down.
I don't think you
Mr.
can.
Pope's
It's in a
group,
con-
well,
con-
I'm just, you know,
conservation easement,
I'm
can
getting
you?
it on the record.
Oh, okay.
What we're asking for is a condition in the final order so that it rides through the rest of this PUD. So the tree line along this side over here is to remain intact. The tree line that was disturbed when they did phase 1 needs to be replanted. And there was,
You know where that one was?
yes, it was right along this area right here.
Okay.
You guys remember down here somewhere? Yeah. And then, thank you, Building 7, that's right. And then number 3 was that they would not build the proposed kayak or kayak launch or boardwalk that went through the marsh to Bowman Bayou. At that particular meeting, we were told they weren't going to do that. They had no intentions of doing it, so on and so forth. So I'm just saying that is being requested to be a part of the final order, that they'd be prohibited from doing a boardwalk and kayak launch to Bowman Bayou. And the 4th one is, and it'll have to be addressed, I think, by their engineer, is that stormwater would not be dumped into the marsh and into the bayou. And the reason that's brought up is that I saw a set of plans. I don't know if they're the latest ones. They were labeled as the Planning Commission inserts for this meeting, for the last meeting. And if I'm going to point, there's a stormwater pond here. I'm not an engineer, all right? There's a stormwater pond here. It appears to have a pipe right to this marsh. So if it's going to do, we know that DEP can approve whatever they want, so I'm not here to argue that they shouldn't be able to do it or it's illegal or anything. It's that we've asked them to not do it, or if they're going to do it, that they use every possible protective measure, because that is a pristine and sensitive area. And that is our argument. So in order to give you supporting information for this particular request, again, 4 requests that we would like to be in your motion if you're going to pass it, or make recommendation to be a part of the final order. So in researching this particular project, we noted, it was very confusing, and that's my fault because we got into it a little late as to what was happening with the conservation easements. The conservation easement that is existing today comes down here and doubles right in here. It's 3.14 acres, I think 3.14, 3.41, something like that. It's being cut in half to 1.9, so they have buildable area. That being the case, we are concerned about the environmental impact, and again, we're not objecting, we just want to make sure that everything is taken care of. So in researching it, we were told that they were not applying for a kayak permit. DEP, however, has a permit from Rostar for, and I quote, Point Washington kayak launch. So now, I will tell you that as I was researching it, and I don't do that part regularly, so I pulled it, I found it. I don't know the status of that permit, I'm not gonna lie, okay? The next thing that we have is a letter to the Corps of Engineers, which I believe they have to get a release from the Corps of Engineers to get that conservation easement changed. And very specifically, this was submitted in their application, so this is something that they're using as their substantial evidence. It says it's going to impact approximately 3.11 acres of wetlands, which we're concerned about, but later, very carefully under B, subsection 2B of that letter, that 92-page report to the Corps, it says a kayak launch and associated boardwalk. And they submitted this to the county, so I have to assume they knew what they were putting in there. So that was the majority of our comments. I would say that there is something that people, that what happened in the first PUD was they did the conservation easements. The staff report says, I think, 24 plus or minus acres of conservation easements. The designation or the set aside, the dedication of that 24 acres of conservation was part of their bonus density points, which got them up to 30-something points. At 35 points, you get 8 units per acre for small neighborhood. I think, I want to make sure they still meet, and I'm sure Mr. Pope can speak to it, but I need to make sure that they still meet that criteria that somewhere on this property is 24 acres of conservation. I don't think they meet it, but I'd like to make sure they do. So again, 4 requested conditions. The first being that the tree line on the upper north-hand corner stays intact. The second being that the tree line that was accidentally removed during Building 7's construction be rebuilt. The third being no kayak, no launch, no boardwalk through the marsh. And the fourth being, please don't dump in the wetlands. And that's it. Thank you for your time.
Any questions? Got any questions for?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak on this? Yes, sir. Come up to the front, please.
Hey, good evening, Commissioners. Daniel Rosenheim on behalf of the homeowners in Magnolia Subdivision. One thing, in a public overlay, you only get the density of the underlying zoning district. So while we understand that the site is 14.38 acres, what we don't understand is how much of the density that they're requesting is coming from residential preservation, which comes 1 per lot of record, which we roughly did 4 lots of record within this yellow area. And then, of course, they'll get 8 density units per acre on this small neighborhood classification in this pink area. But what we don't understand is how they get their density bonus point calculation in their site data table. They calculate it from the total overall acreage down to the final phase instead of, and they calculate the total based on the total 47 acres. And then they basically were allotted a potential of 374 acres, and they do the math down instead of saying that we have small neighborhood, we're allowed so much per acre here, and we have so much residential preservation, we're allowed a certain amount of density from that. So we would like a better calculation based on their density. We're calling into question their density calculations and just trying to get clarification on how they got to the density calculations in their site data table.
Well, I'm sure they had to explain that to staff, so we'll get explanation from them and staff too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak on this?
Al Laird, thank you for having me. I'm just reiterating, I've done this over and over. They're wrong. I mean, it's just wrong. I don't know any other way to put it. We don't want it. We don't care about the apartments. We already see the apartments. We asked for no connection. They didn't listen to us. Oh, they're going to wrap it up pretty and say it's emergency only. We're going to gate it. I don't care about that. I got my kids running around. I like my neighborhood the way it is. It leads to nowhere. It only benefits them. It doesn't benefit us a bit. I mean, what are we going to do? Go over and look at the apartments? I can do that from the road already. What it allows them to do is come out and check a box to make more money. And hey, that's an awesome business plan. But sometimes it doesn't work that way. Buy you another way. Y'all front 331, leave us alone. And then that leads me to, there's so much you can throw against the wall and stick. It gets confusing. But it boils down, to keep it simple, stupid. This is residential preservation. 1 per lot of record. It doesn't add up. The math doesn't add up. They're going to tell you it does, and it doesn't. Ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't. We don't want
We're going to get that answer from staff too.
And then if you answer that, there's a whole lot of other issues. So, thank you.
Anybody else like to speak on this? Yes, ma'am.
My name's Marguerite Cherry, and I live at 105 Cedar Street. And I moved here in 2017 from Nashville, Tennessee. And I grew up there. I lived there for 56 years. And I left looking for a new life after a long marriage that ended with Parkinson's disease. I looked all over this area. I looked in Fort Walton, I looked down 30A, I looked in Destin, Sandestin, and I just couldn't find that old Florida, quaint neighborhood feel until I found the house on Cedar, which I bought, and I've done some improvements to it. I've met all of my neighbors. We're all very close, and it's quiet. So if I want the action, I can go down to 30A, or I can go to Destin or wherever else. But when I come home, it's quiet. And if you allow Mr. Pope to do this and cut through our streets, which would be my street, I've understood that they want to use it for construction, and you all certainly know what that would involve. I think our speed limit's 15 miles per hour, and I've yet to see some of the construction people go by at that. And I've seen trash thrown off the back of certain vehicles. So there's all those kinds of issues that change the whole scope of the neighborhood that I looked so hard to find for my last chapter here in Florida. So I hope that you will take in consideration the emotional impact it will have on each of our families. And it's true, we all are there for each other, and we all know each other. We walk to each other's houses, and the children play outside, which is unique in this day and age. And I don't know if any of you, have any of you ever even come into our neighborhood to see it? Mr. Harden? So you know what I'm talking about. When I moved there, it was still a sandy street.
Right.
And it was just exactly what I loved. And it was the big trees, the moss, and everyone is nice to each other, and we know each other. But you have 96 units, no telling how many that actually means in terms of people, or emergency entrance or access out. This changes the whole scope of everything that we have. Ms. Brooke, have you ever been there? Mr. Perry?
I have.
Ricker?
I can remember.
In the vicinity, I can't tell you for a fact that I've been down your street, but I've been down.
I'm the only house. Babcock? You've been there. So you know what I'm talking about. It's a little circular street with a small street down, right there cozied up by the bay. It's nice that we can walk to the Bay Restaurant if we need to, but it's not been interrupted like a lot of what, even since I've been here in 2017, I've seen the interruptions to these communities, and I'm like, we had 1,000 people moving in a week in Nashville when I left after 56 years. We didn't have the infrastructure, and people were just tearing things down and building, and it changes a city. It changes a community. It would change this county, and I hope you'll take the emotional appeal in this, as well as all the legal questions that we have about it. Thank you for your time.
Excuse me, did you say you're the only house on that road?
I am.
Okay.
Now, Mr. Laird has property that goes all the way through, but mine's the only residential home built.
Okay.
There's other lots that are available to be built.
I've been down there, it's just been a long time.
I have a driveway now.
Progress. All right, y'all, any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak on this?
I'm Burton Brunson. I'm in the Stark subdivision next door to Magnolia. 1 of 4 homes.
Okay.
So I've got all kinds of issues. Already having problems with water, flooding, every little bit of water. I'm downhill. I'm probably one of the lowest lots on the bay. Get water at the front door. We get heavy rains. Comes down the side from their subdivision, fills up the wetlands between my neighborhood and Bay Magnolia, 20, 30 feet in my yard every time we have a storm. I've been through this rigmarole with Rostar once already. Met with the county. I guess Mr. Blond was in charge of Rostar. Met with him and assured us everything was as it should be. Ended up that Rostar built 2 buildings and a parking lot on our easement. Went to the county. Please help. Got nothing.
You said they built on your easement?
So our dedicated easement. We were getting to our neighborhood through a little pig trail. Got nothing from the county, no help from anybody. David and Goliath, my neighborhood.
Were you still able to get to your property? Because as long as the easement's accessible, that's what an easement is.
Yeah, through somebody else's property.
Well, if you have an easement, it's not your property. You said easement over the property.
We were not using our easement to get to our property. We're using a pig trail through someone else's property.
Okay. Maybe I'm not following you then.
Well, you explain to me what the difference is. We had access to our home, but it didn't belong to us.
Did they built on your easement?
Yes, it was property deemed to us for our easement.
Okay.
I lost everybody.
No, I think I'm following you, but I assume it was their property, or they couldn't have built on it.
Who does an easement belong to?
Belongs to the person that owns the property. Well, the easement is for the benefit of somebody to cross over your property, but the owner of the property still has the right to use the property as long as you still have an easement across it.
Right.
Do you still have an easement?
We do.
Okay.
We do. But at that point in time, that was our easement. Our deeded easement for our neighborhood to get to us. At one point in time, their property was part of the Stark subdivision. They purchased Stark subdivision. And in our ordinance, we're allowed a 2-story structure. That's it. As far as I know, I don't know if that's been changed. Right now, Mr. Senate has 70 feet above him, apartments, towering. That's what I'm gonna have. Left 38. Got away from all that. Now I'm gonna have 4-story apartments across the street. Community pool house. So there's a lot there. But it's gonna change everybody's life in my neighborhood, Magnolia neighborhood. Not for the better in any way, shape, or form. But just want to go on record that I'm not a fan. I am completely and totally against this. Every aspect. Not good for anybody except for their pocket, like Mr. Hal Laird noted. It's hard to see that big money can do this to little bitty neighborhoods that can't defend themselves. All we have are you guys. Appreciate your time.
Any questions? Anybody else like to speak on this? No, I'm sorry. Anybody else in the audience like to speak on this? All right, I'm not seeing anybody else, so we'll close public. Yes, sir.
I'm Guy Arella at 52 Magnolia Lane, and I've been looking and studying, and of course, I'm not technical, and of course, many of these things have been worked out with the technical committee, but there's grave concern with these apartments and the encroachment and the way they're coming down to the bay, especially with retaining walls and all the mitigation issues with wetlands and the picking the spots to build the apartments on, as to whether there's really been the technical research into any flooding and how these walls and how the flooding is going to be changed based on these apartments. I also think that we really need to look at the pond that is there right by, on 331. All the drainage from that pond goes right down through these wetlands. And it's a big consideration to see the technical drawings and engineering on how the floodwaters are going to be controlled in all of this. So there's so many questions left to be discerned here, and I'm hoping that we'll go back to the drawing board on a lot of this and see what's going to happen. Thank you.
Anyone else want to speak on this? Okay, we'll close public comments, let the applicant answer the questions. I know staff's got some questions that were directed, seem like more to you than on some of this stuff. Mac, do you want to go ahead and address some of this? You want to wait till the applicant finishes? Okay. Mr. Pope?
There's a few things I can clear up right away. Bring some light to this. The roadway proposed First of all, by the fire code, we are mandated to have two entrances. Anything over 100 units, the new code has to have two entrances, and they both have to be remote from each other. We have proposed the entrance that everybody's concerned about, this one right here. This is a closed, gated emergency entrance only. That would allow fire trucks in, it would allow ambulances in, things like that. But we don't have any choice but to have that second entrance to meet the fire code. So that's one reason that's in there.
You say, let me ask you a question before we move on. You say it's an emergency only, so are you saying it won't be used for anything except emergency vehicles?
That's after we're completed with the 96 units, that's all it can be used for. So in other words, you won't have the traffic from the 96 units is all internal and goes out to 331 where our existing entrance is right now. So that will not change. And internally, everything that we have, all our tenants will go out the main entrance on 331 and come in that way. So this will be gated, and the only way you can get in it is if you have a honker where the police can come up and open the gate, or the fire department can open the gate. So,
they have a specific device that opens it?
yes. I call it a honker, but there's probably a more technical name, but they actually can, the gate will open and they can go in. But nobody else can have a code. It'll be locked all the time. It's just not used for anything but emergencies. And it also allows us to comply with the code for the second entrance.
Got you. But you are planning on using it for construction?
We are going to use it for construction. And what we've pledged during construction, those are dedicated streets. And I'm not saying, we will maintain those streets if we have a problem. We will, if we need safety guards, whatever we need during that it's about a 7-month construction period, maybe 8. And we'll have safety things and measures. We will, if we damage the roads, we'll repair them. And we'll get in whatever we can do our main gates, but our main gates aren't wide enough for a lot of things. So anyway, yes, it will be used for construction.
How many apartments do you have in there now?
264.
Is this a new rule that you have to have a
Yeah,
secondary?
it's a brand new rule. We didn't have, when we first did the 264, all we needed was one entrance.
Okay.
And what we did do, I'll regress and go back. We did work out with Sammy Sanchez. We have what we call the quad in the back, which allows fire trucks to come in, and it's in effect a big cul-de-sac, and they can go right back out. So we satisfied the fire code at that time with that big loop. But now it's no way we can get, the law is clear now. It's NFPA 1141, which dictates, it's a brand new revised law. So back to we're not adding any traffic when we're complete throughout the subdivision, Bay Magnolia. So I'm going to skip some of these things on density and let staff look at those. But I have I have some reasons too that I'll help them out with. But the other thing is the flooding. Mr. Bronson was up here and talked about flooding. We don't even have any structures over there. We're not even close to his property. So And the whole thing that we decided to do, he's right in here. We have three existing residents right in here. Right now, there's a dirt trail that they use and they've used for the last ever since we've owned the property, 2004. It does cross our property, no problem with that. But what we're proposing is a new road, a dedicated road, county standards with a cul-de-sac that would service these people right here and go down this way. So that is the road that we've obligated to do and we'll put in. We'll put it in as quick as we can. And that will alleviate any of the dirt trails.
Okay.
Let me go, and let me address the other one I don't think staff can address really, but with the estuary, we've agreed to replant the area that was destroyed in phase one of the apartments. That's this area, really right in here.
Mm-hmm.
That was, what happened is this grade went up, they took the trees down. They can put it in the development order, we said we would do it. We're good for our word. As far as the kayak launch, we pulled that. The letter that they handed out was 2018. We pulled that last year. We're not going to do a kayak launch.
Okay.
And that's a promise that we gave to Estuary, we wouldn't do that. I'm going to let our engineer talk about the stormwater going into that area. The biggest thing that we did, we thought, was good in our meetings, and I have minutes of a community meeting that we had. We promised that we would screen our apartments from their area, and we did so by creating conservation easement here, taking the existing easement and leaving it, and then for estuary, we did the same thing. We created easement here. It can never be built. It's given to, as you know, the state of Florida.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I think that's mostly what Melissa had, but those are, I mean, we've obligated to do what they've asked for. And we'll be glad to put that in writing, or I think we put it in writing. It may be in our order now. So.
Okay.
And then I'm going to there's two development orders we need to talk about density. One was 2009. One was reconfirmed in 2012 when we came back and did the 264 units. And those clarify a lot of the questions that come up of what we can do and what we can't do. I'm going to let Mac do what he has to do with his, and then our engineer wants to address some things too.
Okay.
Ask him a question.
Yeah, so, Mr. Pope, we've got a question for you.
Unless I misunderstood, I think somebody came up and stated that once you got finished with the current number of units that you have, 264, something like that, that there would be no more development. Is that, I think that's, is that what one of the?
I didn't hear that.
If you look in the land development code, we, at that time when we got our first development order, there was an amendment, an overlay district formed, which allowed us to build 376 units. Out of that, we built, of course, 264, and then we came back, and we've always had on our plans, if you go back to any of the files, there's always a future development for this parcel that we're talking about now. We'd actually proposed to the county when we first started about a year and a half ago, about 145 units. And we negotiated, and we worked hard on it, and we had 5 buildings, we went down to 3 buildings and 96 units. So we reduced it by 70 units of some, to get here where we are today. And we thought that works for us, and it worked at that time, or worked for the county right now, so. These apartments also serve a real need in South Walton. We're very competitive because our land cost was very low when we bought this in 2004. A lot of these people bought after us, but we've always been straight up. We've always had a development plan for apartments on this property. As far as the density goes, I think we've met all the requirements. It's in the code, it's in the 2012 development order, and it's also in the overlay district, what we can do. That, the overlay district was done to take into account all these different zonings, preservation, small neighborhood. It combined them into one unit.
Mr. Pope, that access that goes to the gentleman that spoke a while ago that's on the bay, that looks like some of the lots that were in that subdivision or something. Did y'all purchase some of that stuff? That road right there.
We've always owned this.
No, where it comes in off of the Magnolia subdivision.
No, that's actually an existing right-of-way.
What about the stuff to the right that's in there behind it, where that easement's going through?
Right here,
Yes.
we did buy one lot here. We bought a lot, this square right here.
Uh-huh.
We did buy that probably 6 or 7 years ago.
Was that for that access? I mean, you're not using it, doesn't look like
It
you.
wasn't, it was a guy named, I'm not even gonna mention his name, but anyway, it was easier. He always wanted us to buy it, and he created a lot of issues for us. And so we bought him out.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Mac, you want to address those density issues?
Yes, I would. In particularly, and I'm going to read from Mr. Roberts' staff's memo from October 12th, there are no zoning and density discrepancies. As Mr. Pope pointed out, this project initially started out at more than 140 units. And staff has worked diligently to make sure that the density is accurate based on the impacts to the wetlands that they proposed, the relocation of the conservation easements, and any density bonus that was associated with any of that. 96 units is all they can have on the land that's been assembled for this PUD, and that's what they're now proposing to have.
So when they did their 8 units per acre, could that, well, let me ask you this.
Staff has reviewed that in detail, and we're certain that 96 units is allowable on this property.
That was kind of my question.
Insufficient traffic analysis. There's no traffic analysis for the Magnolia neighborhood because there's no traffic going there. There is no traffic directed to that north entrance. It is only on the plan because the fire department requires it to meet the fire code. When this project was originally approved some 10, 12 years ago, that rule was not in place, or we would have required it at the time. But that's a life safety rule that we now have to accommodate, and it's been accommodated in the most, or the least intrusive method for this particular neighborhood, and that will be enshrined as a condition in the development order, that entrance is emergency only. If there was some, let's just say there was a fire that occluded the main entrance on 331 for this development, yes, the exit would come out of that. That's an emergency condition. If for some reason there was a flood that prevented access for emergency vehicles getting into the property or those residents getting out, that could potentially be used as an emergency exit. But once the apartments are built, that's it. That's why it's there. That's why there's no mention of it in the traffic analysis, because there's no traffic allowed to exit there, except in an emergency circumstance, and those emergency circumstances are not considered in the traffic analysis.
And you've seen this before on other projects, haven't you?
Yes, sir.
Does it work?
It does.
Okay.
The references to compensatory storage do not reflect the most recent analysis by the county and documents in the file. They provided a no-rise analysis, an alternative engineering analysis, and we have accepted that, and no compensatory storage is being required. That's consistent with the code, and that is in the file. It's not in what they presented tonight, but it is in the record, and it's in the staff report.
Could you elaborate on that a little bit? I don't understand what you just said. I understand the idea of, with respect to fill, but I don't understand why it's not a requirement on this project.
Because they provided an alternative analysis to demonstrate that there's no rise in floodwaters as a result of the fill that they're providing.
And, okay, so
That's an engineering analysis. Their engineers here can be happy to explain it.
how does that work? If you have a rainfall like the one we had here recently, and you've got all this new development, where does that water go?
I think the engineer can explain it in very much detail, but my understanding is we've
Okay.
got some 36-inch pipes that provide additional outlet.
To where?
That will actually go to the bay in the event of storms like we've had.
Okay.
Now, one thing to remember is the rules that we have in place to address flooding that are required by FEMA. If you looked at what was approved last week, there's a warning in there, in that language, and that's been there since we adopted flood control language. It basically says these are reasonable regulations to prevent foreseeable flooding. It does not guarantee flooding won't occur.
No, but it does put
Reasonable regulations necessary to prevent flooding.
I understand that, but it doesn't, there's still a requirement with the amount of fill you can bring in, right, according to the comp plan.
The Land Development Code has specific implementing regulations for any comprehensive plan policies, and we've accepted that alternative analysis as meeting this requirement.
Okay, it doesn't strictly meet the requirement.
I believe it does.
Well, you gotta, it meets the requirement with an asterisk, and I don't understand the asterisk.
Let's let the
You know,
engineer explain that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can go into the
All right.
engineering detail if you'd like.
Okay.
But the roadway absolutely is not for ingress and egress to the apartments. And we've been very clear with the applicant on that, and I think the applicant has agreed with that and has designed the project such that it meets that requirement. Now, one additional thing. This project was approved and gets the benefit of the code that was in place when this PUD was approved by the Board of County Commissioners. At that time, what may be referred to as double dipping of density and intensity on the same acreage was clearly allowable in every land use category. And in this particular category, the infill piece out by US 331 has 7,700 square feet of commercial space conceptually approved there and allocated there. The density, the underlying density of that parcel was clustered out of that parcel to the apartments. So yes, absolutely double dipping occurs on that infill parcel, and it was approved by the Board of County Commissioners, and if they want to build the 7,700 square feet of commercial space there, there's a development order process available for that as an additional phase, and I think that's shown as phase 2.
So do the calculations that are provided to justify the 96 units, do those include double dipping then? Are you using the same acreage?
That parcel, for the infill parcel.
Using the same acreage for both density and intensity?
On the infill parcel only, and that's absolutely legal. And it's approved by the Board of County Commissioners in this PUD.
I respectfully disagree with you on that. Sorry.
I respect your opinion, yes, sir.
Mac, you said that rule was in place when they originally applied for their, I guess, their first development order. That the rule on that road, that was in place at the time too, but apparently the new rule is going to precede the old one here as far as
And I
having
think
access.
the fire department has decided they wanted to implement that rule much more closely over the last 12 years, and we've been very consistent about that since they made that a requirement. Requirement in this place, it was not a requirement when this was originally approved.
Okay. Any other questions for Mac?
Yeah, well, just a general question along those lines. I would assume that anything that's part of a detailed development order application would have to meet the new standards. If it wasn't covered in the PUD application or the PUD document, would be subject to the new standards, right?
Generally, I think
Like
that's
the
correct.
road, like the access point requirement. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir, if you wouldn't mind.
Good evening, Robert Carroll, McNeil Carroll Engineering, 17800 Panama City Beach Parkway. We are the civil engineer of record for this project. A couple of things regarding the stormwater. So in this area here, if I could point to the map, here's the DOT pond that was constructed whenever they did the widening of 331. That pond, actually, we went and pulled the plans, and we also provided a copy to the county, so the county has it for their records. It actually, all that water comes in, back up 331 towards the bay, so it does not discharge to that conservation area. So all that water doesn't currently come to this property, unless it were to somehow top the banks, which we haven't observed. Our property, we have designed an internal wet detention system. It provides treatment, provides attenuation. Typically, when you discharge an estuarine water body, you don't have to hold for flood control. However, we're holding the water on site for that 100-year event. So not only the 25 that you require, but also the 100-year. We know this is a sensitive area. We want to make sure that we hold this water on site. It does discharge towards that conservation area. However, it is being treated in the wet detention ponds. We can look at it, the calcs, and maybe even raise it to provide more treatment. That's certainly possible. But as far as flood control, we've analyzed every bit of this. You've got kind of a closed basin in here from the conservation area. What happens, that area, it stages up. There's a roadway kind of bottlenecks it. There's a small pipe that allows it to drain towards the north. What we're proposing to do is put a 36-inch pipe within that conservation area at the edge of the road. It's way all the way through. So we actually have a very large pipe to allow that water to get out. It's in a flood zone because of tidal surge. So it's when that bay stages and pushes that water up, then it's got to try to get out. Well, we're giving it a positive way to get out of there. Based on all the models that we've done, it's actually, after this development, we're holding, we're attenuating, and the levels in that area are actually lower than what they currently are.
And what is that, did you say it's on the 100-year flood plan?
We're holding ours to attenuate for 100-year on site.
And that's, but the pop-off is that 36-inch pipe?
Yes, sir. It does two things. It allows that conservation area that holds, if it ever gets water, to discharge, which we know it has water. It allows it to outfall, and then we also outfall to it.
I mean, I don't know if there's another place to put the water if you, I mean, it's all going to
It's all
eventually end
going
up
to
in
the
the
bay.
bay.
So
yeah.
we're going to this, and then by popping it to that conservation, it actually allows it to filter even more through that property before it ever even gets to the bayou.
With the conservation easement?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Got any other questions?
Yeah, how do you feel about the compensatory volume of fill? That's not, it's clearly spelled out in the comp plan. We're not providing it.
Well, actually, we're allowed, within the property, we're allowed to put 24,651 cubic yards of fill, and we're at 24,582 cubic yards of fill.
And how many are taken out?
Taken out, what do you mean, sir?
No net fill.
This is the net. That's how much dirt would be brought in on the site.
All right, what's the typical water table in this area?
Well, it depends on the grade changes there. There's a depression in the property, and there's some water holding in some of the site.
Right. I mean, what if I dug a hole where the apartments are going right now? Where would I hit water?
Well, the finished floors are sitting, I think, at maybe. Our finished floors are sitting at 11, which is pretty comparable to the existing facility and the stormwater basin. Get there. The water table, I think, is somewhere in elevation 4 to 5.
4 to 5 feet?
Yes, sir, above sea level.
Okay, and I assume that that area is vegetated, got some trees on it?
Sure, yes, sir.
What's the water table going to be when the trees come out?
Water table, I mean, we typically should stay the same. I mean, the trees aren't absorbing it, but we're containing that stormwater within those wet detention facilities.
Some people think that the trees act as sponges and actually take up a fair amount of water.
Sure.
And that affects water tables. It also affects wetlands.
But you also, in a wet detention, you have an orifice and a bleed down, so you control that level of the water with that bleed down orifice. That's what keeps it as a constant level. So within 48 hours to 72 hours, we typically have that level stay
Right.
the same
Right. Okay.
after a
All right.
event.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Any other questions for staff or the applicant? I'm sorry, we've closed public comments.
Just one general question for Mac. Is there anything in this application that is not consistent with the approved PUD you know of? Okay, thank you.
Any more discussion?
Help me remember the name of that neighborhood that's off of 98 as you're heading west to the right. That's one way in and one way out, and they did everything they could as far as the prescribed buildup, and the neighborhood is still getting flooded all the time. Alan Osborne brought a lot of attention to this area. What was the name of that?
Driftwood Estates?
Driftwood Estates, and, excuse me? Okay. I'm kind of wondering if we're not creating the same problems with this proposal as far as,
How do you mean?
well, when they say 100-year flood plan, we all know in Florida that what that really means is once a year, we're going to get a 100-year flood. Every time a hurricane comes over and comes anywhere close to us, that's a 100-year flood. And it happens every year. Every year we have a hurricane. So I've got some flooding concerns for the neighborhood. But most of all, with almost 100 units being added, that's probably 200 cars. And then the roads aren't being upgraded to accommodate this much more traffic. And I'm wondering if
Which roads you talking about?
the roads around this project.
Well, there's only one road that they're going to be using that's not in the project, and that's 331.
There's some safety issues that one of the people brought up that I've got some concerns on. And I think we heard Mac say that traffic analysis wasn't necessary, so.
I think he said it wasn't necessary in the Magnolia subdivision because they're not going to be putting any vehicles in there according to their plan. So they didn't need to do a traffic analysis in that subdivision. They've got one for 331, correct, Mac?
I got some safety concerns and I've got some flooding concerns, and
I understand. We've all got flooding concerns. We've had a lot of rain this year, but I mean, we have to rely on our engineers to give us this information. We're not engineers.
and we're putting a lot of untreated stormwater into the bay that we say we're trying to clean up.
I think every project out there has that pop-off where they treat to a certain level, and then if it becomes too much, they have to have a way to let it escape, because that does reduce flooding. But that's the only way you can do it, is to let it go somewhere. You can't hold it on site, all of it.
I've got some reservations about the infrastructure being able to support the addition. And that's just
Which infrastructure?
roads, traffic, flooding, and what the neighbors think means something. we can go forward with this.
I'm sorry, what do you mean by that?
Are we at the point to where we make a motion?
Yeah, you can make a motion if you want to. I mean, we're still discussing, but you can make a motion if you
Okay,
want
let's
to.
finish discussing.
Anybody else got anything? Tom, you got anything?
No, I was worried about the traffic, but evidently it's not going down Bay Magnolia. I was living there, I would be worried.
Yeah, I would too. I wouldn't want it coming through there either, but if we're to believe what they're telling us, you know, Mac and them have designed it that way, so there's not supposed to be any traffic in there. I mean, if we're not gonna believe the staff and the people that are giving us the information, then we got a problem. Because we're gonna have the same issues come up with every development we look at. All of them are gonna sound the same when it comes to floodwaters and things like that. They're all gonna work the same, so we gotta be able to believe these guys, or
Is there any way to get some comments from somebody that made, that could help clarify my concerns? Could somebody be called back up?
the engineer, that's what he does for a living.
The gentleman that, had the traffic concerns,
He's not an engineer. Now, you can ask him, but you might as well ask me.
I think I like his answers better.
Well, unfortunately, we've closed the evidentiary portion of the meeting at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, the time to ask those, for the board, understand we're in a quasi judicial proceeding. Whereas the first item we had, and Mr. Carpenter, I think it's actually very helpful that he made this comment for you. Under our legislative, you consider policy. And policy of what's in the best interest is something that is within this board and ultimately the BCC's hands to make that. And if it is determined something is not broadly within the best interest of the community, that is a policy level concern. Those are legislative determinations. Under the quasi judicial proceeding, we have to base our decision on competent substantial evidence. And so we have an evidentiary portion of the hearing. We have presentation from applicant, staff, we allow public comment. Public comment is sworn. Now, somebody can stand up and say, I don't like something. That's not necessarily competent substantial evidence. That's their opinion, but it's got to be factual-based evidence to support a denial of a plan that otherwise complies with all elements of the Land Development Code. So when we go through these hearings, the time to ask the questions is when somebody is at the podium. That's when we're allowed to do so, because then the applicant has a due process right to provide rebuttable and similarly cross-examine. And then our staff similarly has the final say, and they can also ask questions. And obviously, Mr. Hall's here online. If he felt the need to ask questions or object, he'd have had that opportunity. So I don't believe at this point, Mr. Chairman, unless you want to reopen the entire evidentiary portion, I don't know that we're in a position to allow for that.
I mean, he's already spoken. He said what he was gonna say. I don't think he'll change it. So you know what he said.
There's been enough said to where I feel that this project could exacerbate problems down there. So we can move on. We know how it's going to play out.
All right, anybody else? All right, commissioners, what are your wishes?
I'll make a motion to approve, based on the traffic not going down that street and the retention of the water on site.
Motion based on what Melissa Ward promises.
Oh, we need a second.
Yeah, unless you want to add something to those conditions, those 4 of them.
That the tree line be replanted that was destroyed, no kayak. Tree line to be kept that won't be impacted, and then no intentional stormwater runoff into the marsh.
Replant the trees. Okay.
So that is your motion?
Yes.
You get all that? We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
Motion carries. All right, Mac, I think we got one more, don't we? No, we got two more, I'm sorry. They look similar, though.
I'm worried about martini night.
Oh, that's right.
Had to have serve pro come over there. We're on the rise of where the water whack-a-mole wants to go.
All right, go ahead, Mac.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next item on our agenda is item number 6, the Water Sound Origins Phase 6 application. Applicant is proposing to develop 87 single-family lots and associated infrastructure within the Water Sound Origins development. We have a special consideration or a special condition of approval on this particular item that the applicant has agreed to. And that's on page 1 of the staff report. A westbound right turn lane at the intersection of US 90 and Breaker Street will be constructed by the applicant as a component of this Phase 6 infrastructure construction. It'll be constructed prior to the county's final inspection and approval for Water Sound Origins Phase 6 development order, should it be approved. That is the subject, I think, of essentially the only public comment we've received about this particular project was concern about the need for that turn lane. The county's recognized that, and the applicant has recognized that, and they've agreed to include that as part of their project at their expense.
So right now, the only objection we've heard has been taken care of.
Yes, sir. I'd like to enter the staff report into the record.
Okay, thank you.
And be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Got any questions of staff? Okay, thanks, Mac. Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Mac, and good evening. I'm David Smith with Interlight Engineering, and I'm representing the St. Joe Company. And as Mac presented, this request is consistent with the approved plan unit development and the development of regional impact. The approval is vested under Development Order Number 05001-00182, and the development DRI was approved under Resolution 05-40. This request, as I mentioned, is consistent in the proposal. Try to use the laser pointer here because I read the sign.
Oh. I'll see you in the bill.
I have to step away.
Watch where you point that thing. You're going to have to go the old-fashioned way with the finger.
I have to, yeah.
Oh, turn it on, that's.
I tried it. So I was reading your sign. That's new for me. I have to go over here. But we're proposing to connect to Phase 1 of Water Sound Origins. Thank you.
It's childproof.
Oh, got it. I got it. Okay. We are proposing to connect to the end of Splash Drive here, which is Origins Phase 1. And this is a new connection that will enter into the community, which we're proposing 87 single-family residential lots. And on average, the lots, there's two sizes, 55 by 140 and 70 by 140. So as you enter the community, we cross the Gulf Power easement here, and then you go in, there's a loop here with a turnaround down here. And then you continue, there's some environmentally sensitive areas, which we tried to minimize impacts to those, the wetland areas. And you come down, there's a turnaround here, and an additional turnaround. This is Lake Powell for reference. and we're proposing a footpath to the existing dock that currently exists on Lake Powell. We have a dry retention facility that's located here along Lake Powell, as well as a second dry stormwater facility that's proposed in this location as well here.
So none of these lots are going to be waterfront lots?
That is correct.
Okay.
They do not connect to Lake Powell. And I do want to point out that this line here, I'll try to follow it the best I can, is the 100-foot coastal dune lake protection zone. So as you can see, the lots aren't even close to the 100-foot coastal dune lake protection zone. Now, the stormwater management facility is in this location, but we're not grading into that 100-foot protection zone. So did want to point out lots are, pretty well away from the lake area, and we did minimize, as I mentioned, impacts to wetlands to the greatest extent possible. That's a general overview of the development, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
Questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, we can open this up to public comments. Anyone in the audience like to speak on this?
Lee Gordy, Gordy, a resident of Stillwater A. I was unable to see exactly where he was pointing as to come in for the entrance and exit of the construction area. I live a little bit further back from the Lake Powell entrance on Stillwater. My concerns are basically the construction traffic in and out of our existing area, to try to understand if there would not be an alternative to access the new area without coming through the existing area, for all the obvious reasons. Just the quiet enjoyment of our neighborhood, traffic, the impact of the heavy equipment and all of that. So basically my concern is, I would like to understand more of a clear idea of exactly the roads in and out. And again, an estimated number of trucks this is going to take in order to fill the area that exists now, which I do believe is going to need quite some filling in order to bring up. Which then leads me to, how long does this take? How many trucks are we talking? The amount of fill. So those are my concern. Again, property values over time, if this is a lengthy time frame, 5 years or so, what that's going to do to our property in my area. And this may actually address the next section 8, I believe 6 or 8, maybe 6, being on Side Camp Road, that I believe is going to be one of the main accesses in, and that concerns me greatly because that's going to be, I believe, quite a few years in the making.
Is your subdivision, because we don't have a map that shows, you said Stillwater?
Stillwater A.
Oh, is that part of the St. Joe project? Okay, so okay, it's coming up. I thought you were talking about somewhere near 98 over there. I got you. Oh, thank you, ma'am. We'll have public comment from you in
That's
just a
what I
second.
was going to say. My concerns are obviously for the entire community, but more so it would directly impact my street, my home, I think in the section 8.
Okay.
The next one. So I apologize for that.
All right. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
We'll have the applicant answer those questions for you when we get
Okay.
finished with the
Thank you
public
very much.
comments. Anybody else like to speak on this?
Hello. My name is Brandon Hayes, Hayes. And like Julie, I'm a full-time resident, Water Sound Origins in Stillwater A. So the question that we're unsure about as homeowners is, what is the construction access for over 300 homes that are being proposed in phase 6, 7, and 8? From what we understand, the construction access is going to go right through the heart of the community. As you can imagine, we are familiar with the wetlands in that area, the amount of fill that is going to be necessary, the amount of construction trucks, just the overall activity is of great concern to the whole community. With over 300 homes, Origins is basically a full-time primary resident community. We do realize that it is a construction zone, that the St. Joe Corporation has plans to construct many, many more homes. But we also think that there are alternate routes available for construction access to these different phases. So we're asking the board to consider to have St. Joe or the developer utilize these alternate routes. We currently have, like I said, we have a majority primary residents. We have hundreds of children. It's an active, very active, thriving community. So if the engineer could tell us what the proposed accesses are for these phases, if they use a minimally invasive to the community access, that's fine. We're not opposed to further development of the project. But we believe that the access is going to be basically right through the heart of the community. And I just can't imagine how many trucks that it's going to take in order to fulfill these 300 home construction. So what we're asking is we're asking the developer to consider the aspects of the community and how the damage to the infrastructure, the damage to the roads, all the activities, the endangerment of all of the residents with all of this construction traffic going right through the community. So we are asking the board to instruct the developer to use the least invasive access possible. And we do feel that there are options available. They're not existing roads, they're not existing paved roads, which of course are the easiest way. But we do believe there's alternate ways to get in. The new development of Nature Walk by Coulter Homes utilized a dirt road access that came to the back of the Watersound Origins. That is a potential access point. So they designed a construction access for that project that did not interfere with any of the existing homes in the community. So we're asking that the board consider alternate routes.
Y'all mainly concerned with the, I guess, the dump trucks that would be coming in with the fill material? Because I think once they get a lot of their construction stuff in there, you know, the equipment, everything, it's usually there during the process. And
Right.
Then it'll be moved
Well,
out. So I'm
yes.
just trying to make sure I've got what you're trying to
well,
accomplish.
the concern is you're going to have thousands and thousands of fill trucks.
Dump trucks,
'cause
okay.
That's
what I'm-
existing wetlands.
Yeah.
It is going to take, I can't imagine how many loads of fill it will take.
Well, that's why we're going to
Right,
ask the applicant.
right.
that
And then once
find
you,
out.
of course, as you're familiar, once you have the fill done, you've got to do all the infrastructure and the sewer and water, and then the construction phase starts. So we're basically looking for these 300 homes. I believe we're looking at years.
You're talking about the construction of the homes now?
Yes.
Okay.
You've got phases.
That's why I was trying to figure out
Yes,
if you were
sir.
just talking about the
Right.
construction of the infrastructure, or if you're talking about houses too.
The whole thing.
I got you.
The development of the infrastructure and the constructions of the homes.
Okay.
We just are opposed to all of that activity coming right through the middle of the development. And I'm sure y'all are familiar with Origins. You've probably been there. It's a very active, thriving community all day long into the evening. So we're very concerned about all of the construction activity and the damages caused by it.
All right.
Thank you for
We'll
your
get them
time.
to answer that for you in just a second.
Okay.
Anybody else want to speak on this? Yes, sir.
Jackknife and Splash Drive. And we've lived there for 5 years and had continued construction trucks and traffic. As they built the neighborhoods, there was no construction roads or anything. They came through existing neighborhoods through the entire project. We've been dealing with this for so many years. And the roads are caving and they refix them, and then, you know, there's all kinds of issues with speeding and the trucks going in the wrong direction, don't know their routes, and then they get turned around, then they go through the infrastructure through the circles. They can't make the roundabouts and so forth. So my question is, are they going to come in off of breakers continually? Or how are they going to access all the new development?
We're gonna ask them.
Are there going to be new roads or existing roads?
We're gonna ask them in just a second. Is that what you wanna know?
Yeah, because it's,
Okay.
yeah.
We'll get them up here and answer those questions for you. Anybody else need to speak on this? Come on up to the microphone and give us your name, please.
Sheldon, we live on Jackknife and Splash Drive on the corner. We have had trucks go through there all day long and to the evening. So, and they're speeding, they're not paying attention, and we've not had one day that we've had no construction trucks come through. They're big, heavy trucks with concrete. They're loads of wood and trucks with dirt. It's constant. We see it up because our house faces, I mean, not in Space Splash, but right there we can see out there. And it's not one time that trucks, I mean, they use Splash Drive like it's just a main drive. And like you said, the potholes, we're getting those like Cannonball and Breakers and a couple more streets have had them repeatedly fixed. And they're still there. I mean, they keep dropping in. But these heavy trucks, these streets cannot handle that. And it's not supposed to. We're in phase 2. They're working on 6 and 8. They're talking about those. We're still having them come through our phase. Yeah. So we're not getting a break from any construction at all. And they're talking about new phases and stuff. We're in phase 2, and we're getting the same. We're getting it coming right by our house every single day. And it's tearing up our roads. And it's terrible for the neighborhood and everything. And they're speeding. They're not paying attention to that at all. They don't even care.
Do y'all have any kind of neighborhood group organization?
We do. We have committees, and they put up meeting times.
If you're gonna speak, sir, you need to come to the microphone.
Yeah, there's a 17-mile-per-hour speed limit through there. And I've not seen one truck drive speed limit of 17, ever.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. You'd like to speak, sir?
Jeffrey Shimizu, Shimizu. I'm like them, I'm concerned about construction traffic, but to answer your question, the HOA, from my understanding, is still controlled by St. Joe, primarily because it's not built out yet. There's so many phases left to be built. So the homeowners only have 2 representatives on the board today.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're really concerned about construction, and I'll talk about phase 8 when they get up here because I have a question about that. But
All
that's
right.
the next one.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak on this? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Patricia Archer, and I'm a full-time resident in Watersound Origins. I also live in Stillwater A, and this is on Log Landing. And currently, it's proposed that the construction, trucks and all the vehicles, even the smaller ones, will be coming from Highway 98. And just to give you a perspective, they will actually come, it's almost a half a mile back into the neighborhood. So they're passing all of these residents and then going down Log Landing to get to these various phases. If you haven't been in Watersound Origins, it's very big on pedestrians. Little kids are out there playing, people are walking, they have their dogs, they're biking. There's a lawn park actually on Log Landing where it's proposed that the construction trucks will go. In Stillwater, everybody goes through that lawn park walking to get to their mailbox. Kids are out there playing, and as people have previously mentioned, we have the flashing speed signs up for 17 miles per hour, and you can, when you're walking, you can sit there and watch how fast everyone is going. And many times you're not safe just crossing the road because you don't see them coming and they're speeding so fast that now they're having to slow down, for you to cross the road. So we're concerned about our safety. St. Joe did not build the infrastructure on the roads for these vehicles to actually turn. So anybody who lives on a corner, their yard is already torn up. Their bushes, the curb, and no one is taking responsibility for this. St. Joe doesn't take responsibility for not building the infrastructure, and then the homeowners, the builders are not taking responsibility for it either. And so it's a beautiful neighborhood. Those areas need to be repaired, but it shouldn't come down to the homeowner either to have to continuously repair their yard. There have been some people that moved off of Splash Drive because of the speed of the vehicles. They were concerned about their children, and so I just want to propose to you all that if this neighborhood does not draw people to it, then you're not going to get the taxes that everybody's paying to live in these nice homes in this nice neighborhood. So it will impact the county as well.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank
Anyone else want to speak on this? Yes, ma'am.
Smith, and I live on Pathways Drive. It's a beautiful neighborhood. When you come in, if you look at the map, Pathways is like the heart of the neighborhood. So I'm the third house on the left. I look at the golf course. I want to know if Pathways Drive is even wide enough to permit this heavy trucks, wood trucks, sheetrock trucks. I don't even think it's wide enough to permit the construction trucks that are going through there. There is not a curb. There is not a sidewalk. There is no parking pads. So I sit in the middle of 5 homes. So when I come out with my grandbabies in a stroller, I am walking along Pathways Drive. I have to go to Trailhead to catch on to like the bike path. And there is a crosswalk there, but people are so idiots driving. You're with the baby and you're going, and they don't want to slow down, even for the crosswalk. They go on to oncoming traffic to get around you, and they're not stopping in the pedestrian crosswalks. And that is where all the construction traffic is coming through. And I swear to God, that road is not wide enough to handle the load that's coming through. So I'm like the other people, I don't mind new development, but we were promised like a new construction entrance that when we built that lot, they said, you won't have construction. And it said construction entrance, it became nature walk. So, and people are going 50, 60 miles per hour, and they put flashing lights up, and they think it's gonna slow the traffic down. It doesn't. So I just hope they have another construction entrance, and with the town center coming in, Pathways will be the main drag to get to the new Publix in the brewery or whatever they're making. So they should really, I really want to ask the engineer if they could check to see if that road is legally wide enough for the construction traffic, but I think it's considered a private road, so they can get away with it. We don't have a memorandum of understanding to bring the sheriff's department in to try to give speeding tickets. Then people don't want speed bumps, but people just are not slowing down, so you need a physical barrier. I've asked for stop signs, and it just falls on dead ears. But, you know, thanks for listening.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else want to speak on this? I didn't think we had anybody else out there that hadn't spoken, but I thought I'd ask, so.
Is this public or private roads?
David, you want to come up and answer this?
They're
We'll close
public.
public comments at this time, and we'll let the
Private
applicant
roads.
Private roads.
close public comments.
For the
David.
record, again, David Smith with Interlight Engineering. And in summary, it sounds like all the concern is construction traffic.
Right.
And I know several of the people, I think Ms. Gordy, that it would actually be on the next phase that's actually proposed to go through the Stillwater development. This phase is going through Origins Phase 1 and Splash Drive, and the construction traffic is coming through the community. This is the master plan development with all the phases that have been planned and approved, and now St. Joe is moving forward with actually developing each phase, and so the later phases do have to go through the community for the construction access. And this phase that you're hearing now and the next phase are the two closest ones to Lake Powell, so they're completely surrounded by environmentally sensitive areas that it's just not practical for us to provide a second access. And to be able to go through the wetland areas that it would take to impact to provide that access. And I don't want to, I know safety is very important to us, and I know we do remind our contractors that there's a speed limit, and you can't just go as fast as you want to go and to be as safe as possible. And I do want to point out with these two phases, laser pointer again, that down along this area, there's a very large bluff. So it's a lot higher down here. So these phases actually just, even though they have the wetlands in here, there's a lot of material that's coming from this bluff area. So this phase is not requiring the amount of fill material that some of the other phases have required. Same thing with phase 8. When we get to that phase, there's also a bluff down as you get closer to the lake, and a lot of that material is to remain on site. And I do agree with you, Mr. Perry, that once the fill material comes in, generally with the site civil construction, once the trucks are in, they typically stay there when they're doing their pipe installation. They do get deliveries, but you don't have that constant volume of dump trucks hauling fill, on an hourly basis, and I think that's primarily the concern. So,
do you know how much fill you're going to have in there?
I don't have that answer now, but I can certainly get that answer, and I'm willing to provide that to the community as well, as we move forward, because I would like to answer that as well. But I know I can say it's not as much as it has been required on previous phases.
Then there's no other options. I know there's a Jeep road there that goes out and looks like there's a breaker street. I can't see because the map doesn't show us all the way out to 98, but does breakers go out to 98? I know there's an agreement to put a turn lane in there.
Breakers connects currently to US Highway 98, and we have agreed to construct the westbound deceleration lane off US Highway 98 onto breakers to improve the safety there. I know there's been concerns, and I spoke with a gentleman earlier today, one of the residents, regarding when you're decelerating to take the right turn, traveling westbound, that it's concerning with how fast people are passing and you can get rear-ended. So St. Joe does agree to add a turn lane there to improve the safety. But breakers currently connects to US Highway 98, and that's the eastern access to Watersound Origins North.
Is there any way to use breakers and then hit that Jeep road and get to it?
There's several wetland areas, and I believe
I don't know. I've never been down Jeep Road. I'm sure it's not a great road. It wouldn't be called Jeep Road. So
I don't think you can drive down it.
You can. I've been on it.
I know the people, when I've heard someone go down it, they were stuck. So I haven't driven down it, so I want to say that, but I understand there's a wetland.
You can start down it, you just can't finish.
how many other phases do y'all have out in that area that would be accessed through here, that would be going through the neighborhoods that they're talking about? Because it looks, I mean, you got two more we know of right there, but are there others that are going to be going down through there? I mean, obviously, Pathways Drive and Splash Drive have been the major source of access, or will be for this.
This phase 6, I mean, this is Lake Powell. You can't go any further south.
What about east, though?
There's an area here which is part of the lake, and the development that we're about to hear next is this phase here.
Yeah.
And then it is the Bay County line.
So how would you get to anything into that area?
The next phase, the access is provided going due north into the Stillwater development that Ms. Gordy spoke about. That's where she lives. So the two developments you're hearing the access is not from the same place. It comes through two different locations.
So you're going to spread the love?
We have no, I mean, that's the master plan and the way it was planned, so that's,
well, I mean,
we have no choice.
For their sake, I hope you do, because I wouldn't want to be on the main entrance coming in where you're going to be doing, 15 phases, when the construction's going to be going on for the next 40 years.
And they have very valid points, and I know one of the things we're committed to do, and I did it myself and staff can tell you, is when there was a complaint, we call the contractor. You cannot speed. You have to be safe, and safety is important for us. Last thing we want is for someone to get.
Have you thought about putting security guards out there, or somebody that could monitor what's going on? I mean, they obviously have a lot of complaints, and I would think this would hurt, St. Joe over time. If enough of them get aggravated, it's going to get out that,
What? I mean, we're open to things. I mean, we could certainly discuss it, but I know the HOA, the developer is on the HOA. It's still developer controlled. And the gentleman that spoke, it's 3 members of the developer that are on the HOA and then 2 homeowners.
But I bet you, in most cases, when you have like construction crews coming, you'll have the same people that are going to speed every day no matter what. You can tell them not to, they're still going to do it. But if you've got repercussions for that, if you've got somebody out there that's taking tags down and saying this guy's going to be banned from this, and call the the contractor and say, your guy's not coming back out here if he can't learn how to drive. I'm just throwing ideas out. I'm just
And they're
wondering
valid
if y'all.
ideas, and I know I would have to discuss that, obviously, with St. Joe and see how that would be implemented, but again, we want to be safe as well. Last thing we want is for someone to be hurt as well. That's important to us, too.
So where's the power line that you said went through there? Okay, so
Is that where old Jeep Road is?
It
Or Jeep
is,
Road?
it is.
So the maintenance road that follows the power line is not travelable?
There's wetland areas, like, for example, there's a significant.
Okay. So
There's no way to temporarily culvert it or something to do I know they do this with timberland, so I mean, if you need to cross a timberland to get more timber, you can put, a temporary crossing through there. I don't know if
And I
they
did
allow
want
that
to
or
point out,
something.
it's also crossing property that is not owned by St. Joe as well, so they don't have the ownership going
Is there
on.
an easement through there?
Not that I'm aware of in the Gulf Power area. I mean, we're having to coordinate with Gulf Power to cross the power line, but we can't turn and go down the power
They
line.
own that I mean, they own the property or just they just have an easement through there?
They own the property.
Oh, they own the
own the
property,
property.
okay.
I'd like to ask a question to council. There's clearly been a public safety issue that's been brought to our attention by the public. If we approve this, despite the fact that they are concerned for safety, and somebody gets hurt, is the county liable or is St. Joe liable?
The county's not liable if a truck driver goes out there and runs over somebody. That's
Okay.
not your liability.
Okay.
The county's approving a project. If the county approves a project and one of the workers goes out there and commits a murder, the county's not liable. You've got to expect people have to follow the law. And so when we approve a project, we're approving a project with the implication being they've got to go follow all of our laws, all of the state laws, every law that exists. Now, if they don't, that's what you have law enforcement agencies for. So no, I don't perceive this to be a liability that the county bears based on merely approving the project. Approving projects, we talk about liability the county may have. We're talking about something that's construction. We're not talking about the finished product of the development. And there's a different level there.
Mr. Smith.
Yes, hello.
It sounds like there are some things that could be done to mitigate the concerns that these folks have. And I guess the question is, would you be interested in talking to your client about the possibility of doing some kind of a neighborhood meeting with those folks to talk about these issues and work with him to see if he's interested in doing things that would help allay the concerns, with respect to traffic, with respect to noise, hours of operation, whatever y'all can come up with that would make them feel a little bit better, might be helpful.
And we have had discussions, and I know one of the ways to control traffic are speed humps, and I know one of the residents spoke, the speed humps are favorable by about 50% of typically the people, and then 50% don't want the speed hump because then you have to stop. So I know we have had discussions and conversation. There are hours of operation too for construction that are already out there. I believe it starts 7 a.m. So they can't start before 7 a.m.
And let's be clear. Hold on a minute, Joe. We can't take anybody from the back.
Public comments are closed right now, so.
There are hours of operation.
Okay.
Now, are people going earlier? I don't know, but there are hours of operation, but I can't say that no one speeds because apparently it sounds like some people do speed. So there are hours of operation and there are speed limits. So, people should abide by the rules.
I just thought I'd raise that as a possibility since I know you really enjoy those neighborhood meetings.
Well, I find it very beneficial, and I've talked to a lot of the community. I don't think I've had a chance to talk to the residents here, but I have the opportunity to meet the residents, and we'll help any way we can. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to be clear, Mr. Carpenter, none of the regulations related to speed, hours of operation, or otherwise are under the county's purview. Unfortunately, it's just not a consideration this board gets to weigh in on.
We could.
And that's one of the most difficult aspects of these. Oftentimes, when you're sitting here at the planning board and you have neighbors who are concerned, citizens who are concerned, fortunately doing private roads, the county doesn't set the speed limits in there. To the extent that we do regulate speed limits on public roads, we have to go through traffic studies, traffic analysis, things of that nature. If they've already been set, the planning commission isn't the stage where that can be addressed. Same with hours of construction operation, that's usually an HOA or a level below the county. Unless we adopt an ordinance to make them comply, all we're doing is approving the development. They've got to build it in accordance with the Florida Building Code. They've got to comply with levels that do not come to this planning commission stage.
What if we make a recommendation, along with, if we recommend to approve that they have somebody out there on site to monitor these situations to make sure that their rules are being adhered to?
We have no enforcement mechanism there. Again, it's
Just be a
their own rule.
recommendation, but
What if they hired off-duty Walton County deputies to enforce the?
I don't believe we have the authority to make them do that. That's the problem. I mean, we can make the recommendation, but at the same time, and I respect where the chairman's going, and I don't mean to undercut him, and if y'all want to make that recommendation, that's fine, but I also don't want the public to feel like they come back a meeting later, well, they didn't do that. It was a recommendation. It can't be a condition of approval because we don't have the authority to legally mandate them to comply with regulations that are not our own.
Can you make a recommendation that they meet with the St. Joe Management HOA and just for their,
to let your,
but make, some of the
Well,
residents.
we can make recommendations up here all we want. We can't make it a condition of an approval is all.
Right, we
And so
can't.
I want the public to be aware that while the board may support all of those, we can't say, well, we're going to pull their DO or we're not going to let them move forward if they don't follow the recommendation. So unfortunately, what we're dealing with here is requests from the community that are better addressed at another level than our own, be it at the HOA level, be it to the developer, be it to, if it speed limits, the sheriff's office, or whoever the mutual aid agreement, assuming there is a mutual aid agreement on private roads between Walton County Sheriff's Office and St. Joe Corporation. I would assume there is. I don't know that. But it's just really not one of those areas that we get to weigh in on this type of development order.
any other questions from Mr. Smith?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, commissioners, discussion?
They never did answer the question about how long it's gonna take to do this project.
Well, we can ask Mr. Smith to answer that
I
question.
got a question from Mr. Smith.
I had to anticipate the civil site construction's probably, I would say, 8 months to a year.
That was a question they had.
Yeah, yes, sir. For the site construction and the home building, I know that goes in certain pods and there's different schedules, and I can't speak to the home building.
Do they have a
construction.
build out on that? Is that something they put in there when you buy the lot, you had to build by a certain time?
I don't know the answer to that. Do you know, Jason?
Okay. But it's gonna be years anyway.
Yes, sir.
For the record, would you approach your boss, St. Joe, and tell them that there's a grave concern for public safety by the residents and ask them to please consider alternatives in the sake of public safety to put their minds at ease?
I will be having these discussions, yes, sir. So I hear the concerns, and I will obviously have those conversations.
And for the citizens, I feel you.
Okay. Okay. Commissioners, what are your wishes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Sometimes we make decisions we don't like.
Well, our hands are tied in a lot of these situations.
I
Like
did not like that vote, but
council was saying,
the way it goes, I'm sorry.
well, you're gonna get to do it again now.
Mr. Chairman, we're at agenda item number 7, Water Sound Origins Phase 8.
Oh, my God.
In the same neighborhood.
Deja vu all over again.
Major development requesting to construct 126 single-family lots and associated infrastructure on approximately 57 acres with future land use and zoning district of Bay Walton Sector Plan Village Center. It's in District 1, and it's immediately east of the last project. Like to enter staff report into the record. This project also benefits from the turn lane that's going to be installed for Breaker Street on US 98. Happy to answer any additional questions you might have. Thanks.
Thanks, Mac. All right, Mr. Smith? Seems like we've done this before.
Hey, thank you again. I'm David Smith with Interline Engineering. I'm representing the St. Joe Company. Water Sound Origins Phase 8. This road goes, there's the same for reference, Gulf Power. This road crosses into Phase 7, which is to the north, and Phase 7 further up, I won't point at the ceiling, but further up is the Stillwater development that several of the residents and members of the community spoke about, and both of the phases do go north into the Stillwater development. And again, well, general overview is this is 57.4 acres, and it's 126 proposed single-family lots. On average, lots are 55 by 140, and also that same 70 by 140 as the previous phase.
How are you accessing this? I know you said through the Stillwater up there, but there's a vacant piece of property between there and this piece. Are you coming through that?
The piece in between Stillwater and this piece is Phase 7.
Oh, okay.
And it already has approval in the development orders, and then construction will be commencing on Phase 7 shortly.
So you're gonna go through Phase 7 to get to this, to
Yes, sir.
develop it? So there'll be a road built through there?
There's a road that comes down, and there's a series of roads in Phase 7.
So you'll be accessing this area not through the pathways, correct me if I'm wrong, but you'll be coming through another area to get into this one?
This is not coming through that Splash Drive Phase 1 entrance. You have to go all the way up Breakers and then go down into the Stillwater development and come through Stillwater and then down Phase 7 and then into Phase 8.
What's the road that'll be going into there?
Log.
Landing Street? Okay.
That's the end of Stillwater, where there's currently a cul-de-sac that's a temporary cul-de-sac that will be removed.
The one that's kind of to the farthest east?
Yes, sir, to the one to the farthest east.
Well, I think it's down there, right there, going to there, right there, yeah, because this is going into Bay County.
I can point on the exhibit
We
if you
got
would
it,
like.
we know what it is. All right, thank you.
But general overview of the development plan is you'll enter in from Phase 7, come in, there's a series of roadways here with proposed single-family homes. We'll come in with single-family homes to a turnaround. Same, there's a gravel path that'll provide just foot traffic down to lake access. Same thing here too, there's a large bluff down here closer to the lake, which a lot of this material is remaining on site. And there's not the amount of fill as previous phases that are required for these two phases.
Center of that, is that stormwater?
That's a very large stormwater management facility. The fill material for that will also be used as well. That's all in the center here. There's one very large stormwater pond for this phase that serves the entire development.
And that cul-de-sac, or what looks like a big cul-de-sac down at the bottom down there, what's in the center?
That's an amenity area, just like a multi-use field area.
There's no buyouts on this project, is there?
No, sir. Like preservation buyouts?
Sidewalks, stuff like
No,
that?
sir. This is consistent with the approved PUD and DRI, so they're not required to buy out. This has the next, what I perceive the next level of environmental permitting. It's the St. Joe with the Origins development and other developments. They're part of what's called a regional general permit and ecosystem management area. So they have very stringent requirements they have to follow for wetland impacts and also increased stormwater management requirements. So
It's hard to believe with all the resources St. Joe's got that they couldn't do some temporary road improvements on the Jeep trail. But that just, I don't see how they can't do that, but it's, I'm going to choose to believe because they don't want to.
And I can't speak to that, but I do want to, point out the same, on these various phases you see a lot of, especially on the previous phase, a lot of preservation areas with wetlands, they're high-quality wetlands and altered wetlands that are being preserved as part of these developments. So it's a very stringent permitting process that most developments don't have. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Anybody got any questions for the applicant? All right, thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll open up public comment. Do it again. Second time around's gonna be better. Huh?
Jeff Shimizu, Shimizu. My only question, I'm not gonna complain about construction traffic this time. My only question is, I live on Log Landing. You've already approved phase 7, which is 76 houses. Now we're looking to approve 126 more. All of these 200 homes, 400 cars or more are gonna come up Log Landing and out. That street is not big enough. And it's going to be horrible for those of us that live there, for all of these people now to come in and out that one street. They can go cat face, but most likely they'll come up Log Landing and go out. It just doesn't seem feasible to have that many going up and down one street. There's no other entrance.
Are they not going to be able to get out that Breaker Street also?
Well, I mean, to get to Breaker,
And I'm just
you've got
asking
to come up Log Landing.
So you go up that one no matter what, and then turn either left or go straight, huh?
So when you come out, after you get to phase 7, you can turn right on Cat Face, or you have to go all the way up Log Landing to get to Side Camp, which other people live on Side Camp, and then you get out.
Okay.
My concern is just all the cars.
I don't know where they get one. It's the problem. Looks like a lot of wetlands around there. Yes, sir.
Hi, Brandon Hayes, Hayes. I wish I'd have known that they confirmed the construction access is going right through the heart of Origins before. Jeep Road is a viable access point that would allow them to not even go through Origins. Yes, it's going to take some money. It's going to take some resources. They could put through the wetlands, like you said, they could put temporary culverts. It could be a temporary situation. You had mentioned you think St. Joe is just doing it because they choose not to. Well, it's the reason they're not considering Jeep Road is it will cost a little money. But if they were to do that, they can complete these 3 phases without going through the development at all. They can come right off of Breakers and turn onto Jeep Road. The gentleman said he didn't know if it was passable or not. I drove it in my SUV the other day, and it is a road, and there are people that go on it regularly. So all it would take is a little effort and a little money on St. Joe's part, which they obviously have both.
Can y'all get together with your HOA? Because as you heard,
Yes, sir. I'm sorry to interrupt. The HOA is controlled by St. Joe. The 2 token positions that we got just this year are just that, token.
I don't know that you've got any other options. I'm saying, you heard what our council said, is that we don't have the authority. We can, we can recommend, but you know what recommendations are like. So.
Well, I mean, couldn't you recommend that you approve the proposed phase under the condition that they find an alternate route?
No, I think that's what he said. We can't do that.
So it's a done deal, so we've wasted our time.
Don't have any options on that, so.
You can't make a developer improve a road they don't own or have any right to. I mean, if you make that condition, then you're imposing governmental taking. I mean, that becomes a taking when you make somebody enter onto someone else's property to do what you can. So we can't, as the government, compel that.
And that's Gulf Power's property.
Well, and it appears, just looking at the map here, you have a line that's EBSCO, and then you have a line that's Florida Power and Light. And so it's not a public road at this point, it doesn't appear.
So I have a question for council, and maybe you can or can't answer this. Since they're private roads, the sheriff is not interested in coming and enforcing anything because they're private roads. They won't enforce any kind of traffic violations, any kind of speeding. They're private roads. So we have.
That's between the owner of the roads and the sheriff's department establish a mutual aid agreement. I can't speak for the sheriff or what they do or don't do. I can tell you numerous developments in this county that have private roads have mutual aid or authorizations of right of entry to enforce traffic enforcement in those areas.
All right.
So I don't know that it's fair to say the sheriff is or isn't. I don't know.
Well, if I'm faced with 3 years plus of construction traffic, what I plan to do, and I'll be on the record, I'm going to park my vehicle in front of my home on the street. Good luck getting by it with all this heavy equipment.
Yes, we understand. Anybody else like to speak?
You know,
Yes, ma'am? Okay, yes, ma'am. Come on up to the microphone because we record this.
I really want to know how wide Pathways is. There's no curbs, there's no sidewalks. Is there some Florida thing where you just can't, it's like a double lane, it's just a 2-lane road. There's a white line here, and it's just so narrow. So I don't know
Mr. Smith can answer that for us, I'm
Yeah.
sure. He knows how wide
And
they are and what the qualifications for that road are.
And I heard this whole development is like 10,000 rooftops.
I
So,
don't know.
so that's, I think that the whole development is.
Excuse me, can you address us? Because,
When I
thank you.
walk
That way we
along
can hear
the
you better.
road, there's no margin of error. If somebody's looking at the golf course, they're on their iPhone, they start looking at you and they start heading towards you. So there's no curbs, there's no sidewalks, there's no parking pads, and they just brought a new thing in where you can't park in front of your home on the major thoroughfares. Maybe they would even consider speed bumps on the major thoroughfares through the heart of the community.
I don't know, they might.
Mr. Carpenter, is there off-street parking permitted within this PUD, or is that even a regulatory issue we've touched on? There you go. So see, it's not something that when we created the PUD, we addressed on-site versus off-street parking, which is what we would do. And unfortunately, one of the things that this planning commission is faced with is that we have DRIs, PUDs, other planned developments that are permitted, that are authorized, and while there may have been negotiation or opportunity to do that at the outset of them, once they're approved, once these roads are private, the county doesn't want to take maintenance of them, we don't get to regulate them the same way we do on somebody on a public road where we can say you can't park on the right of way. The health, safety, public safety issues that we could step in through South Walton Fire District and the Sheriff's Department dissipate because it is now between the private owner of those roads and those entities. So while we approve the development order, we approve the plat, things of that nature that is under it, the traffic, parking, those type of issues just really fall outside the purview of what we have. So in terms of if we were being asked to approve this under a traffic analysis standpoint, that's a different scenario. Where we're at right now is, does it meet consistency with the PUD and the comp plan and the development of regional impact resolutions that are in place? If it doesn't, then you have a different process to go through.
Okay, thank you.
Anything you want to add to that, Mr. Carpenter? That is a very simplified summary of what you deal with PUDs and DRIs, but I don't want to belabor this board too much longer on that issue.
Could we, before we make a motion?
We got public comments.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Patricia Archer again, ARCHER. And maybe this question is more for Mr. Smith. But when our yards are torn up by these large trucks, who is responsible for repairing those on an ongoing basis?
We can have him answer that question when we close the public comments.
Okay, and then I just want to make one comment. I know you all seem to be concerned that it sounds like that once these fill trucks come in, you all say that they're on site and there shouldn't be any more damage.
Not the fill trucks. Those are the dump trucks. They would keep coming. The construction trucks that would be in there.
Yes, I was going to say, it's the concrete trucks that are hitting all the yards, and it's the ones that do the big piping in the.
Pumper trucks?
Yeah, pumper trucks, yeah. So that's ongoing, it's not just
Yeah,
at the
that would be all through the
beginning.
construction, home construction part. I was just
Right.
curious as to what phase y'all were most concerned with. Didn't know if it was the whole thing or
Yeah.
just the infrastructure phase.
Yeah, the whole thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else, public comments? Okay, we'll close the public comments, and Mr. Smith, you can.
I wanted to briefly answer several of the comments. As far as the unit count, Watersound Origins it's approved right for less than 1,500. So I'm not sure where the 10,000 homes, where that came from. I was unaware of that, but it's far less than that is what it's approved for. And as far as who fixes, like if a construction company damages someone's front yard, it's that construction company's responsibility to repair what that company damaged on property that's in anyone's front yard. I mean, that company will be held liable, and it's their responsibility to repair what they damage or what one of their drivers damages by either being negligent or making a mistake. So it would be their responsibility to repair
I
those.
think they're gonna have a problem proving it, though, if they're not sitting there filming it when they go by.
I mean, but say,
I mean, you
and I'm-
know what they're thinking is how you're gonna prove that if somebody's not out there watching them and seeing it, because
and I make my point is like, say.
I understand what you're saying,
Yeah.
and I agree with you, but
Right.
they still have the problem of proof. All they're gonna see is the evidence that somebody's run through their yard, and that's probably what happens. They come out and it's done. So,
They have security cameras.
or security guards that are out there. Anyway,
David, is Jason with St. Joe?
Yes, he is.
People, that's who y'all need to talk to.
just put a target on you, didn't he? I'm sorry, go ahead, David.
I'll be happy to answer any further questions.
Well, actually, I was gonna, I'm thinking, I'm looking at this map here, and I know that you all don't own Jeep Road, and I know it's not suitable really, but I think, whoever makes the motion, I think we should put in a recommendation that your client take a look to see if there's any way at all you could access that, all that development, and that would just bypass all the neighborhoods. That would solve a lot of problems. So if there's any way that it's feasible, I think that would just be really helpful. And I understand that's only a recommendation.
Seems like you'd have some goodwill with it, though, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I know St. Joe's are a very responsible company, and I would assume they would want to take a good look at that. That is an awful lot of construction to go through neighborhoods. And I know in Seagrove Beach, the Nature Walk development there had a construction access that went through the state forest. I don't know how they did it, but that sure alleviated a lot of construction traffic out of that area, out of that neighborhood. It was a really good thing. And like I say, I don't know how they did it. But something like that here, if there's any way to do it, I think it'd be just very beneficial.
From my perspective, it would have to be some other way than Jeep Road, because as we've already mentioned, we don't own the property that Jeep Road runs through. It's the Gulf Power property, and then there's an EBSCO portion of property that the Jeep Road does go on to.
And I guess I would recommend that your client talk to those people and see if you can organize something there. I mean, it's possible you can make an agreement with them, right?
I'm not sure. I can't speak for them.
Right.
Any other questions for Mr. Smith? Did you answer everything you needed to him? I know.
Thought I did, so if I
Okay.
didn't, I will be more than happy to, but I think I did.
Okay, I couldn't remember, so. All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Commissioners?
I'll make a motion to approve with the recommendation that Mr. Smith's client take a hard look at finding a way to use the Jeep Road to access the construction sites.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion?
To be clear, that is not a condition of approval.
Not a condition, just a
Yeah,
recommendation.
can we do that?
We can make a recommendation, we can't make it.
Yeah, as long as it's very clear to the applicant and to Mr. Smith that this is not a condition of approval.
I mean, the only thing that, wished it was a representative here.
You don't know how.
There is. Not there.
Well, why aren't you talking to these people? Well, there it is. I
This
mean,
is the end.
Oh, wow, yeah.
But now,
personally, I think you guys ought to be getting with the HOA and talking to them and mitigating all this stuff. They're not against you.
Well, we got a motion
They
on
just want a solution.
Sometimes we make,
Y'all not being good neighbors.
sometimes we make decisions up here that we hate doing.
I
We
mean,
really do.
I don't want to vote against your project, but I think you need to work with these guys. Yeah, but you need to stand up and tell them that. Well, go ahead, sir. I'll give you the floor. I mean, if it's.
No, we
party,
You can't.
yeah, we can't do that
we've
at
got
this
a
point.
motion on the
Maybe
floor.
maybe y'all, you should go back here and talk to these folks. Because there's a lot of heartburn there. And I feel for them, but,
And public safety.
yeah. But,
Joe's been put on notice now that there is a public safety concern. So,
but I want to just go on record,
The
you
record.
guys need to get together. Because we shouldn't be here 3 hours.
All right, we need to go ahead and get this vote done.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I agree.
any other discussion on it? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, sorry, I figured I could get.
Break, I know he.
Anytime y'all do, y'all tell me. I'll stop the meeting. Figure I better get the vote out before she. I didn't want to stop it right in the middle.
What we need is a beer break.
No kidding. Beer, scotch, something.
Beer and a hot dog.
Absolutely.
That ought to be part of
He's got a
the,
martini break, he's hitting. See you, Michael. Take care.
that ought to be part of the position.
But no, y'all, because I don't know what I'm thinking, but y'all need to take breaks. If you'll just slide a piece of paper over. Or
I'd
just
rather
say,
get
"Hey,
home
break."
early.
Just let me know
What are we
anytime.
discussing about?
Stuff on it, rolling down the
Pass
road.
that item on the agenda. Got one more item.
Goodbye.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Oh, I know, we just.
I thought he was the engineer.
Okay, that's fine, I just saw us ended Zoom, I'm like, wait a minute. Should we just throw somebody off?
Yeah. All they, and, you know,
Hey, I was
they
gonna
can't
say, look,
assume they can use it, but they can certainly go talk to Gulf Power. One's on.
Down is off and up is on.
That's backwards.
No, it is back.
That's backwards.
Oh, that's right. We're not adjourned yet. Oh.
No, I think we,
Michael had to go, she stepped to the restroom, but we can keep going.
Keep us straight.
I said, we can start without it because we got quorum.
It's hard.
can't leave yet.
It's a hard job.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was getting ahead of myself here. Mr. Tricker, would you like to address your item?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, this is a suggestion that I think, at least from my point of view, it'd be really good if we had project agenda packet binders with tabs in them so we could kind of follow what's happening, so you can look at the materials that are under consideration. And I know we can bring in laptops and iPads and things like that. It's not the same thing. It's not that easy to follow what's going on. I just think it'd be helpful. And even if maybe all the commissioners don't want a project binder, maybe we could just make it available to the people that did want it.
I've had them before, and they work fine. They were a little bit cumbersome and a little bit getting them is another problem. You're gonna have to drive up here and pick them up every time.
I don't think I need them in advance because I can always go in and download the agenda
So
packet.
you just want it for the meeting?
For the meeting, exactly.
I know, for instance, we got an extra copy up here. We usually do have an extra copy. Perhaps if we did 2 extra copies for the board table just to have up here in case it needs to be circulated.
Good idea. I don't know that we necessarily, I won't need one. I've learned.
I've got, I don't want one. That's,
Well, mine
I got a life, okay?
Right.
But it would be helpful if it was up here for us to look at, but as far as having one to take home, no.
No, I don't think you can take them home, can you?
Oh, yeah, no, you could have a board book.
We previously provided them as soon as they were available, which is essentially a week before the meeting,
Yeah.
providing them to the individual commissioners, but we're happy to accommodate whatever request you have, because we want to make sure that you have the materials that you need to make your decision.
I don't think I want to take one home. My wife would kill me.
Maybe when Ms. Owen
They
sends.
do tend to stack up, given the frequency of our meetings, but if you would like, I mean, we can make them available here at the meeting, if you just want a resource while you're at the meeting. I mean,
That's fine by me.
Yeah, let's
Happy
just
to
put
do
1 or
that.
2 up at the board, put, 2 or 3, excuse me, we got 1 of it, just put 2 up here, 3, and then certainly have it circulate around the table.
And certainly, we have a printed copy that's our public record copy that by the time the meeting starts, is not needed up there anymore because the office is
Right.
Well, there
almost
you go.
closed. But,
Right.
I mean, there's one copy that we always have. But we'll be happy to accommodate that request for your convenience.
Thank you very much. That'd be very helpful.
Know what you needed?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay,
Now you can do it.
we're adjourned.
So we have.
Lee was already packed up halfway out the door.
I was.
Oh, hold on, Lee, we got an item here.